13th, 2018 to order at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland.
Here.
James Burton is absent. Ken Jones is absent. Jeff Guard is absent. Melina Meyer.
Here.
Ann Schaefer.
Here.
David Allison. And James Weiss is absent. It's not a quorum, but it's okay for a work session.
So the first topic, work session topic, is a budget review and discussion. And I'll turn it over to Manager Lanning.
I think what I'd like to do is we can do the budget as we go. I thought what I'd do is begin with the borough discussion, because we probably have some folks here that want to go through that rather than anything else. And
sure.
You know, we're certainly not taking a position on this, but we had Councilwoman Meyer and staff, planning staff, go to the previous meeting, and you feel free to report anything you want, but the request sort of morphed from us to attend the session to fund part of an economic study relative to borough formation. And so we wanted to give council an opportunity to talk their way through this, noting that those funds aren't budgeted for us for this year, but also noting that, keeping in mind what I've said before about jumping off places when we get involved in these long, protracted issues. And this is a place where certainly my belief is after the economic study, you could still jump out of it, but at least you'd be at the table to determine the benefits or lack thereof for the city of Cordova as a borough. So with that, I'm just going to leave it to your discussion, and when you're ready, we can go on to something else.
Okay.
And Leif has done a lot of leg work, so feel free to ask him to come up and answer questions.
Council, would you like to hear some feedback from Councilman Meyer and Assistant Planner Leif?
Yeah, sure. So on June 20th, we went over to Girdwood. They asked to have all the communities in Prince William Sound that would be part of the borough to attend to see how interested Prince William Sound would be. Girdwood is not in the boundary that's already drawn for Prince William Sound, but it's not too far out. It's actually just a little sliver that would include it, because it's basically the Chugach National Region as well, National Park Region. And a lot of people had a lot of questions at the meeting about a borough. Not a lot of people had, there's no economic study that's been done in a while, or borough feasibility. Most of the concerns were about education, what it would do for the tax dollar, what another layer of government would do. And a lot of those questions can't really be answered, I feel like, until we have a study done. There's some past studies that we can look at to see what the budget was for them, but it's kind of a lot of unknowns for that. One reason why Girdwood wants to join our borough is they are currently in Anchorage Borough, and they don't have a local government. They're part of the Anchorage Assembly, so they want more local control, and to do that they want to form a city governance and then be part of a Prince William Sound borough that they feel would fit their needs better, being a small rural community, and they don't face the same challenges Anchorage does. Any questions about a borough? I feel like I've looked up a lot of things and it's been a while since the meeting, so maybe answering questions would be.
I wonder who all participated, which communities had representatives there?
Whittier, and actually our attorney was there with Whittier, Holly was. Valdez attended with their city manager and their lobbyists. Native Village VIAC was there. We were there. Girdwood was there, and Chugach Corporation was. So there wasn't anybody from, necessarily from Titlik or Chiniga. I think that's about it. And then EAC Corporation, I heard word that they kind of didn't invite them, but they didn't know kind of about them. And so they are now in the loop about what's going on with that.
Other questions, council?
So from what I understand from, well, 1997 was the last time they did a feasibility study, right? And it was basically like without Valdez, it doesn't make financial sense for PWS, but they weren't including Girdwood, you know, and that, you know, that's probably in the last 20 years. So, but as I understand, Valdez is out, but they went to the meeting, but then after that, they decided to not go any farther.
That's my understanding, yeah.
And so, I mean, I guess with Girdwood, it's different, you know, that adds a new component, but before it was basically like not financially feasible at all if Valdez wasn't included. And so, yeah, maybe you have more information.
Yeah, so Valdez said that they're out, but really the ultimate board that makes the decision on it is the local boundary commission. So even though they're out and we want to keep them out of this study because they've asked to be out of the study, depending on how it goes through the local boundary commission, the reality might be that they are part of the borough.
So who is the local boundary commission?
So it's a board at the state level, yeah, and they have representatives from different regions, but they're the ones that have prepared the report of the ideal boundary study for boroughs, and they're the ones that make all the decisions. Like if the city wanted to annex additional areas, we'd make a petition, send it to the local boundary commission, but they also deal with the borough boundaries and those decisions as well. So.
And so at some point, like, does it come down to like a vote of the towns that are?
It would, I believe it's either a vote of the people in the communities, tell me if I'm wrong, or legislative action.
Kind of sounds like it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
So a community, I believe, can opt out of voting for it because they don't want to be a part of it, but the state will say, yes, you're part of the borough. Because basically the state has, from my understanding, the authority to just put us in a borough.
Right. And that has kind of been an ongoing, I don't want to use the word threat, but I'll use it, and you know, that the state would just force communities to form into boroughs, but that has been going on for a long time, so how realistic that could be is kind of an unknown.
Are there any precedents of that yet?
No, I don't believe so.
They've almost mandated it, but they've taken that part out of each bill, I think. I forget which year it was, but there was a year where a few years where they were going to mandate it, and they decided to take that out because they wanted the
They
community
never
to do
also
it.
forced the community to go in.
I don't know if there was an application that went in that had one community that didn't want to be a part of it. I don't know if they passed that, like one community didn't want it. I don't know the history of that, but that may be a question of the local boundary.
And they answer questions from the public. I mean, their website has a ton of information on it, and the folks from Girdwood I know have talked to a lot of the local boundary commission, just to kind of get a feel, because they're in a weird situation where they not only have to become part of a borough, but they would have to leave the borough of Anchorage. So it's kind of another level for them. They want to make sure that that's even something feasible before they really spend more money on it.
And I think one of the concerns too is Titlik and Chiniga, they didn't have somebody in there. There was someone from Chugach Corporation, but I don't know how that would affect the villages being in a borough, because right now they're not a classified city. They have a different type of government. And also they're part of the Chugach School District, which I believe does Whittier, Chiniga, and Titlik, and then a couple other villages that are out of the region. Property tax is also unknown one.
Did you want to add, Leif, to Councilman Meyer's feedback from the meeting?
Not a whole lot. I would say, as kind of stated in the memo, I feel like at the conclusion of the meeting, you know, the idea was that if there was a borough, we would want those municipalities that exist to retain as much. Obviously, it's the decision of ultimately the people what they want the borough to be, but that it would be a pretty minimal borough, except for the school district, which I believe we're required to do in the borough. But so in terms of, you know, the concern about another level of government, I'm not sure how much, you know, would actually be, oh, you have to get, you know, this to the city and then it goes to the borough. Really, you know, like for land use and planning, that would be something that if the city chose to, you could totally retain it. There would have to be a land use and planning part of the borough that dealt with the unincorporated part of the borough. But in terms of the city, I'm not sure how much would actually be affected in terms of, you know, our existing operation versus operating in the borough.
So there's 3 basic powers, I think, that the state invests in boroughs. Do you recall what those are?
There's the education piece. There's the property tax piece, which basically the property taxes all run through the borough. And then, you know, part of that funds the borough's education, but then, you know, the city gets the rest of the, you know, whatever they set the mill rate at.
Yeah, so their education.
Planning was the third.
Yeah, planning, yeah.
But that,
Planning authority, so they're like planning authority.
only,
and their taxing authority
only for the areas outside of.
outside of the
So
municipality.
it'd be like a coastal management plan for everything outside of.
So like right now, a subdivision, for instance, outside of the Cordova city limits is an unorganized borough, so the state is actually planning authority. So they would have to follow state zoning or state subdivision requirements too. The inside borough boundaries. And then also generally boroughs have, generally get land allotments from the state when they form, so that can expand the economic base of a region. Sometimes it can, I think you can make selection of state lands.
Yeah, the borough would get 10% of the vacant state land. You would select whatever 10% of the land the borough wanted, and then they also get payments from the state to operate the borough for the first 3 years. And I think, you know, it starts out big and then it gets smaller and smaller. I think it's 300. I think the baseline right now is $300,000 the first year, 200 the next year, and then 100 the third year. But in speaking with Girdwood and the local boundary commission, they feel very confident that the state would actually give more money if there was a voluntary borough formation.
That was one question I had, because that amount was the same, I think, since the 1997 one. So I think it would cost us more than the state was initially going to pay.
Maybe we could negotiate more than 10% of the land too.
Yeah, I don't know how much, yeah. And then there's also, you know, the property tax piece, which there's a portion of the pipeline which is outside of Valdez's city boundary that they already pay property tax directly to the state for it. So, you know, they don't really care whether it goes to the state or the borough, but that could be a huge part of the borough. And that's just kind of one of the unknown things, and, you know, why it would be good to get an economic study so we can actually talk more concretely about the numbers, because right now it's kind of speculative. We can kind of look at those past studies, but they obviously didn't include Girdwood.
What was the nature of the, did Girdwood kind of present its case and, you know, their goals, and then the communities were mostly kind of in a questioning phase, or did any of the representatives or participants express any thoughts in general, or?
I feel like a lot of the people attending were in the questioning stage, and Girdwood is still trying to figure out, I think, how they would set up a government. They talked about really having just more local control, because right now they have to do everything through the Anchorage Assembly. I think a couple examples that they had is that they did a town hall type meeting, and they didn't want fluoride in their water, so they went to Anchorage Assembly, and Anchorage Assembly said, well, sorry, you're getting fluoride in your water, because it doesn't really matter what their vote is, they're not an actual governance. All their land planning or building permits has to go through the Anchorage Assembly, so people have to go up there and come back, and it takes them 1.5 years to get a building permit or a certain license. And they just feel like they're a small town that wants small rural decision-making, kind of like we have here. You know, we make decisions for our town, and it seems like they were really falling on that line and didn't really want a borough that dictated what all these communities are doing. A couple other things that we brought up too were being able to work with each other about transportation, about tourism. They paid Anchorage sales tax for their whole town, and that's basically what they make their revenue off of, or Anchorage makes the revenue off of that. They get the 12% bed tax that goes to them, that goes to the Visit Anchorage mainly type of campaigning, and they were thinking, well, if we, as an option, not saying that we should do this as a borough, but just as another option for a borough, we could do a borough bed tax and do Visit Prince William Sound, or try to tackle some of our transportation issues on a Prince William Sound level.
And that is their economy. That'd be like us having a 6% fisheries tax or something.
Right, I think it's 12.
They generate a lot of revenue in proportion to their size.
Yeah, they have a lot of B&Bs. The hotel that we were staying at the resort said they have over 300 rooms, and they're booked pretty much winter and summer. So.
One of the things too that is kind of interesting is they have looked at all their options, and this was the first one joining the Prince William Sound Borough because they feel like they have a lot similar, and the communities are all the same size, but they also do have other options on the table. So, you know, they aren't desperate for us to develop a borough so that they can come in. They have some other options. And, I think, you know, before long, they might start pursuing those. So, consideration.
Councilman Allison, can you hear us okay, and do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I can hear you guys fine. I don't have any questions at this point in time. We'll get into it in the debate later.
Are there questions or comments, Council?
I have another question.
Yeah.
So I can see, yeah, a lot of the benefits for Girdwood, and they're the ones kind of spearheading this. So they're the more motivated ones. But for Cordova specifically, the benefits would be, I mean, potentially taking some of the pressure off of the city government to, like, some of those powers might go to a bureau of government. Like having more, like, political power. Would it help in terms of, yeah, like having a voice with the transportation and like with the state? I don't know, I'm just trying to understand what the concrete benefits to Cordova would be from being a borough.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one, and you know, I'm not a proponent, I'm just kind of trying to provide information, but I think the big one would be, you know, the school district, looking at what sort of cost savings there are or not with doing that. One of the opinions that I heard voiced from people who have looked at this 10, 15 years ago is the political power thing was a huge thing. And, you know, the point being, we don't, as a city, have any say what happens on the islands or across the sound. And, if, you know, a large part of our economy comes from those resources, you know, really the political power of Cordova is very limited, and especially at the state level where, you know, you're competing with large population centers. And so those are the big advantages that I've heard mentioned.
And I'm not sure if our representatives would change, but like Girdwood and Whittier have different representatives in Juneau than us and Valdez do. We're in different districts. So I don't know if we would become in one district whenever that happens, but we would have a lot of representation for Prince William Sound.
2020 census is when they would redistrict.
It is every 10 years, but I don't know how they do boroughs.
They look at borough, I think that's part of the consideration for how you farm your district.
I think it's more likely, but it isn't assured. I mean, just thinking out loud right now, there's a lot of districts, voting districts, they'll have most of a borough and they'll have some other little chunks. And so I think they try to keep them fairly regional, and then they have to meet certain population targets.
Right.
And did you understand there are some shared taxes that the state has that it shares with cities, and there's better shares with boroughs, and especially, and fishing are the ones that matter to us.
Yeah.
And if the borough included all of the water in Prince William Sound, that would be huge for the borough.
Yeah, I don't want to say that it's almost like it becomes a local excise tax. So I don't want to say that the raw fish tax would go 100% to the borough, but it's a lot more likely that the borough would get the full raw fish tax and not pay a big share to the state. Because the idea is that the services that you have responsibility for as a borough or the responsibilities the state has for now. So they're reaching in and taking revenues from your region to cover their cost of being the platting authority and the taxing authority, and the education is the big one.
Does the state fund education on a per student amount the same in a borough as it does to like the city of Cordova? Our school district? Yes.
I mean,
We don't know.
What's the timeline for something like this?
I mean, it's probably a ways out, but a couple of years if, you know, it moves along.
What's the timeline for the feasibility study?
2 months. And I think Girdwood's idea was to try to get that wrapped up before the holidays come around. And also we had talked about, you know, having a meeting with the consultant here in Cordova, especially since Valdez is out. You know, us and Girdwood are the big communities. And we were thinking that having the kickoff meeting before they do the work here in Cordova would be a good idea, and then later meeting with the end of the report, you know, the finalized report in Girdwood about it. So I think, you know, really now's the time where we should start thinking about what questions we have and what questions we can, you know, send off to the consultant if they're economic related. Otherwise, you know, we can reach out to the local boundary commission and other communities if there's other questions.
And it sounds like too that they want to do this first one and then maybe do another really detailed one.
Yeah.
After the application probably is in. Because I think it just takes a lot of information to really get a detailed one and then be able to ask more questions about it.
And just for time management purposes, how long were you thinking for the budget discussion? Just a few minutes?
I can go as long as necessary or unnecessary.
My thought was, so we have a public hearing at 6:45, and we have a lot of representation from the community. I see the Native Village, some business representatives and whatnot. If council would like to open it up to some audience feedback and questions.
Sure.
Okay, I'm seeing nods. So if you're in the audience and like to speak to thoughts on a borough formation or questions that you might like to hear answered, you know, as a business or a representative in the community or Native Village, that'd be a good time. Okay.
I guess.
Trey, if you could come up to the microphone, that just helps Councilman Allison, and just your name for the record.
Trey Losey. My question would be, so like, I think some of the communities in Southeast are in boroughs, right? So I would just be curious if you, as a borough, if you're more responsible for paying for like this ferry system or not. I mean, like I think I heard it when we were talking about maybe Wrangell and Petersburg and borough, so I just was wondering if they are then more responsible for the Marine Highway or not.
I don't know if they're more responsible for it. Might have a louder voice while they're getting ferry service.
They're each in their own borough. I don't think they're together.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of small boroughs
Yes.
down there.
I know.
And I think the state said they're not going to be doing that anymore, like a one community borough.
yeah, they started kind of doing little spot boroughs where they became little city-states. And so the Marine Highway System is a Department of Transportation, and the state and federal government share the responsibility for transportation in the state. So the airports usually the federal government pays the capital cost, so they'll buy the boats or build the runways or build the towers and so forth, and then the state is responsible for the operating cost. And that's the way the marine highway system works. But like Melina said, if you're in a borough, you have a lot more say in the schedules and you have a lot louder regional voice. And I think some boroughs may have participated in some of the private or local ferry systems.
Pittsburgh has some.
Yeah, I know Prince of Wales, there's two, but one of them's, I think, in dry dock, and the other one's, I think the state might have taken over, so it didn't work. It doesn't sound like, anyways, I don't know.
Okay, that's a good question.
David Romhill, Mile 6, Copper River Highway. I was involved with the Borough Formation Committee last time we looked at it, and I think it was maybe 2005, 2006, something like that. And I think one of the general takeaways that I had from that process was that everyone initially is opposed to an extra layer of government. I am too, but that having a regional government has some benefits to it. And so after we had our biggest public meeting, the initial response, you could tell from the public in attendance, was very negative, but by the end of the meeting, people were thinking, oh, this maybe isn't such a bad idea. So when you're looking at it, first thing to guard against is the knee-jerk reaction that extra layer of government is bad, because there's things the borough can do that we as a city can't do, and there are resources out in the Sound that may be in need of some level of management that and protection that otherwise we can't accomplish as a city. The vast majority of the pink salmon run is on the western side of the Sound, and we have no say about planning, platting, or land use out there. And when we get to the point where Anchorage finds it's in their best interest to annex Whittier, which they could, and then Whittier ends up being the doorway to Prince William Sound for everyone in Anchorage, and their type of boats and their type of recreation, who knows, they may say, we're not interested in having commercial fishing boats over there because it imposes on our recreational opportunities. So I think that there's definitely a case for having a regional government looking at planning, platting, and land use. What we came up with was with education was there didn't necessarily need to be any great changes. Granted, there'd be a change in the school district, but you have good school districts, and that would continue because people in Valdez care, people in Cordova care, and are willing to fund their schools properly and give the schools proper attention. And granted, we'd be picking up the load of whatever schooling, education is needed in Girdwood and Whittier, but I don't know that that's an insurmountable obstacle, and there may be some benefits from being joined together regionally with the other communities. And on taxation, we took some values that we knew based on city budgets in Valdez and Whittier and Cordova, and we just ran some new numbers. What would it take to fund the borough government? What would it take to maintain the same level of services that cities currently have? And what's the tax base in each of the communities? And we actually came up with something that was fairly positive looking for Cordova. You'll have to go back through the minutes to see what that actually was. In my recollection, it could be something as low as 5 mil property tax, 5 mil real property, 5 mil personal property, and 5% sales tax. I mean, that's what we were kind of pitching. Where would these numbers maybe line up based on the values that we knew? I'm guessing that's probably was pretty optimistic. But it initially didn't look horrible. So give it a look. And don't be scared of an extra layer of government. We're the people, we control that government, right? We want to be in control of our region. My dad's generation, when they were going about statehood, I had asked some old timers at one point, and I said, why were you guys so interested in statehood? It seems like you're all generally against a lot of government intrusion. And they said, we wanted to control our own destiny. You can only do that if you're in charge of the government. So a borough government can be as good or bad as we choose to make it, and I think we can make it okay if we wanted to. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Karen.
Karen Kramer, Native Village of Biak. So NBE was there with Leif and Melina and everyone else. And I agree that Girdwood, I think, his main focus is getting out from underneath the municipality of Anchorage and having a little bit more home rule. NBE has not come out with an opinion one way or the other yet. We're just kind of waiting to see what the benefits are as opposed to the negativity. One of the concern of ours is how is it going to affect our tribal members? How is property tax going to affect our ability, or our tribal members' ability to retain their land and their homes? How is the borough going to appraise affordable housing? And is that going to be appraised at a property tax level that our tribal members can't afford to pay? You know, how is that going to look? How is the school district going to look if the school district is governed elsewhere? How are the principals going to be formed? Are the principals going to be here? Is there going to be a superintendent here? If it's a shared superintendent, how invested are they going to be in the community schools? We've got really good schools here, not to say that there aren't good schools in the rest of the region, but you know, how is that going to affect our tribal members' ability to have really good education? And also, if the seat is in Girdwood and the assembly is in Girdwood, how is that going to mean that everyone else is traveling or Skyping in? And how is the balance of power going to kind of fall out with that? Tetitlik and Chiniga, you know, they just, well, all of the tribes and corporations just received land in, you know, the early 70s, and then the oil spill came and they lost land. You know, they're very hesitant to give up any sort of home rule. I mean, how is that going to affect the land that they already have? How is land going to be conveyed underneath the borough? I know that Chugach is very concerned, and Chiniga Corporation as well, and I believe Tetitlik is very concerned. They were a little bit less vocal on the conversations I've had with them, but I know that the corporations are very concerned over what that's going to look like. But NBE is kind of taking a, you know, wait and see. What is it going to mean? So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, great, thank you. I remember back to the borough discussions that David Romhelt was talking about. That was one of the big concerns, is where would the seat of governments be? And you know, for those authorities, the concern was everything would end up, for instance, in Valdez. The school superintendent for the borough school district, the borough seat, the borough planning authority, the borough manager, and so.
And I think there's a good case for it to be in Cordova. I mean, we've kind of been always part of a borough discussion, it seems like. I think I was reading that, I think in 1966 even, they had a borough discussion in Cordova. So it's been dating back pretty far that Cordova's always at least engaged in the conversation. And I don't know where Girdwood stands on having the assembly there, but they would be a brand new government, and I think that it should be probably in an established community like Cordova or Valdez, but I think that a discussion that happens after borough formation about where it's going to be located. Or we could put it in there and say we want it here, I don't know.
I will just mention that I was contacted by Chugach, Alaska 2 or 3 weeks ago and have kind of been playing meeting tag. And I do have a meeting scheduled for 11 o'clock tomorrow morning with Sherry Brett of Chugach, Alaska Corporation. And I think the general tone is they're very concerned, and they also have some thoughts on boundaries and stuff. So I'll report on that after that meeting. But other members of the public have any comments or questions? Any more questions or comments, council? Okay, we'll move on to the next work session item, which is the budget and revenue discussion. That's, Manager Landon.
I think that what I wanted to do this evening is just sort of give you an overall trend of, we're starting later than last year in budget preparation. And as we get closer to having some of our meetings about the budget, I've prepared on the board based upon a memo some of the things that I've thought going forward. If you look at fiscal year 2017, our approved budget was 10,294. We ended up with 10,770, I believe. We don't have the audit for that yet, but that's where we are. So we had a positive impact of 466,000 to our revenue, but as we know, that came from a higher than normal fish tax. In fiscal year 2018, the current budget we're operating on was 10,374, and that included 300,000 in revenue from the motor vehicle fuel tax and the increase to the cap. David, did you get these? You got all these documents in the shot on the board?
I did not get the shot on the board yet, but I'll get it.
Okay, I think Susan sent that to you. We'll try to send it to you again. But it's part of the memo that I distributed to council sometime back a week or so ago. So anyway, you can see with the loss of the revenue in motor vehicle fuel tax and the cap, our budget comes up about 300,000 short. We're assuming that the months into it that there really weren't a lot of cap or sales tax because of the quarters involved. And my first cut of the budget in 2019 is 9.97 million, so we're under 10. And you can see the trend. We're going downhill in terms of revenue. As I indicated, I think a really good number for us is around 10.6. The best number would be 11 million, I think. And you can see in the left-hand column what our budget looks like based upon 9.97 million. 1.5 million to the school district, plus or minus. I always say that because there's, if they have an additional request, I know there's a kind of a strong, not kind of, but there's a strong emphasis on the school district. CCMC, we've tried to limit their funding at 600,000. I think, they're probably in the best position they've been in for some time. So, but I don't think, at least for some time, that's going to go away. Although we're having other discussions. Debt service 1.954, that goes about 10 grand every year. So we get a little bit of relief. And then 100,000, which goes to various organizations that we fund. So as I've done anyway for that, leaves our working capital. The transfers to other entities is 41% of our budget. Our personnel costs are 58%. That includes all the medical, it includes everything That number's been coming down from a high, I think it was 7.2 million it was in just a few short years ago, which leaves us our operations money of $583,000. And on $583,000, that takes care of all the general fund. Remember, this is general fund. Takes care of all the fuel, takes care of all the purchase of equipment, broken tools, tires, all of those things. That's not much of a budget for us to work with. For example, we had a furnace problem at the police department, cost us $12,000 to fix. So those kinds of things. So here's what I've been thinking, and eventually we're gonna come to this direction from you of how you want to be. We removed from the school resource funds from the budget because it was an unreliable source of money that was not appropriated for 16 or 17, or was it 17 and 18?
I don't know, because it's the fiscal and the calendar.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So they didn't reauthorize it, but they did appropriate funds for it. We've been running about in the 600, 700 earlier realm. This year, we get 620 and change. We've already received that. But for the previous year, we only got 15,000 because they appropriated for the timber receipts, but they didn't appropriate the school money. There's a recalculation of that. So we really don't know what 19 is going to look like as we move into our fiscal budget. So what I've been thinking about is this. All of our enterprise funds are in tough shape. We haven't had some fee increases there in quite a while. So how do we fix the whole system and provide the least impact to citizens? Well, one thing we can do is we can program the SRS money back into our budget, assuming that in 2019 that number is going to be about 580,000, which puts our total operation money at about 1.163 million, which is a decent number. It's not our 2 million number from 2016, but it's pretty good. And then we can build some increases into the enterprise funds over that time. I've written on the board 5% each year for the next 5 years in the enterprise funds to get us back to the place where we can purchase equipment and improvements. And that's just a number that I've written on the board. I don't want anybody going home thinking it's 5% a year for 5 years, so we're not there. In the red square, you can see that I've written really 3 options for us to consider. We can do status quo, plus or minus nothing, which means that we'll build a budget around 9.97 million. What does that mean? Well, that's what we'll talk about when we have our first budget presentations and we've gone through the meetings. We can do the SRS funding. That means that we take the 9.97, we add the SRS funding, and then we can add, look for new funding as we go. Spend some time talking with the community and talking as a group about what kind of funding we can look at. I have a memo from our attorney that details some of that. Our motor vehicle fuel tax is out, the cap is out, but there's excise taxes. We've committed to leaving property tax the same, so that's another option for us. The third option is to do either the status quo or the SRS and look for new funding to get to 10.6 or 11 million. So we have some options. The deal with the SRS money is that in any given year, you're subjecting yourself to the risk of that not being reauthorized or appropriated. So you're going to have to deal with that. We have I have written balances on the board. Our balances are 8 million and the permanent fund is actually a little bit higher than that. We didn't have a terribly good half of the year in the permanent fund, but nevertheless, it's good. We have $1 million, which is the central treasury, which is deposited with UBS. We have 2.5 million, actually the number's higher than that, in cash flow. We have some property taxes and fish taxes that'll come later in the year. Actually, our sales tax is tracking higher in the second quarter than we budgeted for, which is a surprise. I suppose if nobody's out fishing, they're spending money in town, so it's probably not a good thing for us. And then we have $1 million in our enterprise funds in the depreciation account, so we have about 12.5 million in cash. Then in this budget, I'm going to request on the right-hand side of the board, consistent with my memo, suggesting that we do a harbor project. Tonight we approve the comp plan, the build grant, and then talk about the used oil building and get going with some progress. And that's kind of what my budget's going to center on. That's what I wanted to start with tonight. But we're kind of getting at the point, 1st of September, we really have a short period of time to develop a budget, particularly if it's going to be tough. So we've got to have some participation going forward to get those things done. And it's after 6:45, so that's all I have unless you have questions.
Council? So last year, if I recall, the budget process really kind of started in earnest in July, and we still got pushed up pretty much to the wire. It was down to December, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think involved in that process, there was, it's intermixed with some strategic planning. If you recall the memo I sent out, if you look in there, I've tied all of these projects and all of our direction to our strategic plan and why it fulfills the strategic plan. And I'm always trying to keep that in mind when I do those particular things.
Council, questions, comments?
What's everything in our debt service? Or are those our bonds?
Those are all the bonds for everything we've done, including the school.
Councilman Allison, any questions?
No questions, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, we'll adjourn the work session. Call the City of Cordova City Council public hearing. That's order at 6:45. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton is absent, Ken Jones is absent, Jeff Gard.
Yeah.
Melina Meyer,
Here,
Ann Schaefer,
here.
David Allison,
Here.
and James Weiss is absent, but that's a quorum, we have 4.
Okay, sorry, Councilman Gard, I heard you, I heard the phone ring in, but I didn't acknowledge that. Okay, so the public hearing is on ordinance 1171. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing the transfer of $269,000 from the General Reserve Fund to the Refuse Enterprise Fund for the purchase of a refuse truck. So it's a public hearing, so if anyone would like to testify, you can just come up to the microphone and state your name and residence for the record. Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to testify? Okay, we'll recess for,
Just call it. You can recess it. It's fine.
yeah, we'll just recess for 10 minutes, and if anyone else comes and would like to testify, they'll have an opportunity.
Okay.
The public hearing is for ordinance 1171, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing the transfer of $269,000 from the General Reserve Fund, which we refer to as the Permanent Fund, to the Refuse Enterprise Fund for the purchase of a refuse truck. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn the public hearing. Councilman Allison, was that you that was able to dial back in?
Yeah, Roger, I lost it and then I got back.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll now call the regular city council meeting of August 15th to order at 7 p.m. If you'd please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton is absent, Ken Jones is absent, Jeff Gard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
and James Weiss is absent. That's a quorum of council.
Would any councilman like to declare a conflict of interest with any of the items on the agenda?
Approval of the agenda first.
Oh, sorry, just about wrote over it. Approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda will stand approved as submitted. Are there any conflicts of interest with items on the agenda that councilman would like to declare? Hearing none. We have a guest speaker today under communications by and petitions from visitors. Executive Director of the Cordova Chamber of Commerce, Kathy Renfield.
Good evening, can everyone hear me? Okay, my name is Kathy Renfeld and I'm the Executive Director of the Cordova Chamber of Commerce. As many of you know, we recently held an event called the Cordova Economic Summit to bring businesses together and engage stakeholders in a conversation about Cordova's economic position and its future. I'm attempting to condense 8 hours worth of that into as short of a presentation as I can for you today, so please forgive me if I talk fast. I tend to do that anyways, but it might work in your benefit tonight. So the Cordova Economic Summit was held on April 19th, 2018, and it was held here at the Cordova Center. The event was conceptualized, executed, and organized by the Cordova Chamber of Commerce, along with our regional partner, the Prince William Sound Economic Development District. It was completely free and open to anybody in the community that wanted to attend. To my knowledge, there's never been an event quite like this held in Cordova. There was an economic funding summit back around 2001 that kind of focused more on specific goals that you wanted funded, but never an open discussion and brainstorming event to discuss the economy in Cordova. The Chamber of Commerce has an economic committee, and their goal was to provide an open discussion among local businesses, organizations, potential and new business owners, and other stakeholders to talk about the economic development topics for Cordova. And as you can see from the programs you were given, we had a full schedule from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. that day, followed by an off-site networking event. We chose some dynamic speakers with engaging topics to add depth to the experience for everyone. We had 5 speakers and 7 panel members. Our emerging economic opportunities presentations included information about the current economic status and trends on the state level, regional, and in Cordova. A representative from the Alaska Tourism Industry Association spoke about sustainable tourism and associated certifications. We had someone talk about the economics of the ocean and the blue economy, and we had a presentation and panel discussion on mariculture as a possible economic opportunity for Cordova. We're really grateful to the people who sponsored the event and helped it come to fruition. The city of Cordova donated the use of this facility for the event, and it really was key to the success of the event, so we're really grateful to the city for that. The Reluctant Fishermen donated the food and hosted the networking portion, and other local entities, including Cordova Telephone, Cordova Wireless, Cordova Electric, and Native Village of EAC all donated cash to support this event. Because of all this support, the event was able to be free for everyone. I think it's really important to know that these entities came together rather quickly and with much enthusiasm to put together this event. I think it's clear this was needed in town and felt like an important thing to do. I'm going to be talking today. We sent out a Cordova business survey before the event, so we'll go through those results. I'll try to condense some of the highlights of the expert speakers and panel members' presentations. We did a community SWOT analysis discussing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat to the Cordova business sector, and then we'll talk about the future. So we sent out the Cordova business survey prior to the event, and Winetta Ayers presented on those results. Here's a synopsis of some of the more interesting findings. We looked at how money is flowing into and out of the economy here in Cordova. We asked business owners where their sales were coming from and where their customers were. That's the blue bars. And we also asked where they bought their supplies from, where they spent their money as a business, and that's the green bars. So you can see the largest blue bar is Cordova. Cordova business owners felt that 82% of their customers were in Cordova, were other Cordovans. The green bar there, right next to it, shows where those business owners then spent their money. So in order to support their businesses, to buy their supplies, materials, and everything they needed to do business, they only spent 45% of that money in Cordova. So there's significant leakage outside of Cordova, and in order to have a perfect economy, you want to have a lot of new money coming in, and you want that money circulating within the community as much as it can before it leaves. So we have some work to do there. The good news is that online sales for Cordova business owners has gone up. There's more of an online presence by Cordova businesses, and that went up from 11% to 15%. When we asked Cordova business owners what the likelihood was of them growing, downsizing, or transitioning their business, the overwhelming response was, I don't know. Business owners clearly don't feel that they're able to plan for the future. There's a lot of uncertainty in a lot of areas in this community that we'll kind of dive into later. That's probably the root of that. We also talked about how businesses are structured here, and you can see that large green portion, over almost 50% of all the businesses in Cordova are sole proprietorships, meaning that there's one person who is the owner, they run the business, they're pretty much the heart and soul of the business. Here's some other interesting data. Average tenure, this is how long a business has been in business. For Cordova, 17 years is the average. That's a long time. We actually want to see a lower number than that. It's good to see a healthy churn of new businesses, of businesses being able to transition to new ownership, and we're not seeing that as much as we should in town. If you look back on the previous chart to see that almost 50% are sole proprietorships, and you think that they may have, I mean, what happens when those people age out? We're seeing what happens. Those businesses are not getting the support they need to be able to transition their business, transition themselves in retirement, and key businesses are closing.
Are we talking about, sorry, that just in the chamber, or that are members of the
No,
chamber?
this was open to all businesses. We also asked what events would make you more likely or more willing to expand your business, and the answers here are were kind of repeated over and over in different ways throughout the summit. There's definitely the same concerns that are coming to the top a lot. A decrease in cost of shipping or more competitive options for shipping would make somebody more willing to expand. being able to find more affordable and suitable housing for themselves and office retail space for their business would make them more willing. If there were more people coming through and living here, if Cordovans were supporting local businesses more and shopping online less, and if there were more dependable ferry and air service. We asked what was the top reason that business owners chose to operate their business here, and the response wasn't so much, this is where it'd be the most profitable for me, or this is where my market is, or this is where I'm gonna get the best price for my product. The answer was, because I wanna live here, because I like this community. It's clear that economic development and quality of life are really interwoven in this town. And you can't really say one is more important than the other, I don't think. I think they're kind of inexorably linked. So that's something that we really need to, I think, focus on in the future here. Quality of life is one of our main focuses at the Chamber. That's one of the reasons we pour so much of our resources into our signature festivals and events. And the other reason is that they increase traffic and generate sales for Cordova businesses. For example, this year, through our Burgers Bucks program, we recorded over $15,000 worth of economic impact in 2 days, just from Shorebird Festival attendees, not including lodging or transportation, just with participating businesses, and those are only Chamber members. So the real number is probably much bigger. So it shouldn't be a surprise that 100% of the surveyed businesses said that there was a measurable positive impact on their business from Chamber festivals and events. I'm going to give you a nice synopsis of Neil Fried's presentation. He's an economist from the state of Alaska. He works in the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and he gave us a glimpse at the stats regarding Cordova's economy, and some of them were rather interesting. Looking at where the jobs are and where the employment sector is, you can see the two biggest portions there are manufacturing and government. The manufacturing portion does include fish processing. And as we all know, and as Neil noted, those jobs are wildly seasonal. So if we were to, do a pie chart of year-round jobs, I think it would look a little bit different. But that government sector is very large. That includes local, state, and federal government, and there are some healthcare jobs in there as well, although healthcare does have its own section too. The self-employed portion up at the top does include, that's where the commercial fishermen are going to be, the ones that own their own business, along with all the other people who consider themselves self-employed. I think it's interesting to note down in the lower right that retail and leisure and hospitality and professional and business services at the bottom, that's a pretty large portion. I don't think that those sectors of the economy in Cordova get the credit that they should for the impact that they have, especially considering a lot of those jobs are year-round. Another surprise was regarding population stability. I think there's a misnomer that Cordova's population is unstable, and if a few families leave or a few families move here, it goes up and down, and we're hurting. But actually, the words that Neil used were amazingly stable. We also looked at population change in Prince William Sound and in the state. And as you can see, Prince William Sound is going down, the state of Alaska is going up by quite a bit. Cordova, the numbers are positive. We're going up by more than Valdez is going down. That's good. Chenega, Titlick, and Whittier, as you all know, their population numbers themselves are rather small, so a few people can swing those percentages pretty high. And this was really interesting. This really kind of jumped out as me as one of the most interesting pieces of information. If you look at this chart, the purple, or it might look pink to you, bars there, that's in 2010, and then the black outline is in 2017. And so you can see that the midlife adult population, the 45 to 54-year-olds, they're obviously getting older, they're transitioning into retirement age and elder care, so you see those populations growing. But one of the more surprising things is there's a definite increase in the 25 to 34-year-old range. We're doing something right here, attracting the young demographic to move here, to move back here, and accordingly, of course, the under 5-year-old range is growing too. I think a lot of us have witnessed the baby boom firsthand, I know I have. And so I think if we were to look at these as what we need to do to maintain this population moving forward, or what needs to be our focus for the future, I think healthcare is going to be really important for us to maintain here with the population aging and with that young population in their baby rearing years, and education. It's also going to be really important to maintain. Next, we had Joel Kladuhouse. He was from the Alaska Ocean Cluster Initiative. He provided some really interesting information about the blue economy. That, if you've not heard of that term before, it is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods and jobs, while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem. So just like when we run our fishery and we try to make sure that we get as much utilization out of it as we can without depleting the resource, that's that idea spread out through the whole ocean and throughout every industry sector that works in the ocean. So the stats say that globally, this industry is going to be doubling to be worth $3 trillion in 2030. The Alaska Ocean Cluster Initiative aims to grow Alaska's blue economy by 50,000 jobs and $3 billion in wages by 2040, which is approximately equal to the oil and gas industry today. So their plan is by uniting industry, academia, nonprofit, and government, they want to replace extractive jobs with renewable jobs in the state. There's many industries involved, including fisheries, mariculture, shipping, research, communications, tourism, defense, energy, waste management, oil and gas, ocean technology, all very different sectors of industry, but they share the same resource, so they should work together toward full utilization without depletion. His organization has developed several mentorships and incubator programs throughout the state to encourage entrepreneurs and fresh minds to explore new ideas that fully and sustainably utilize the ocean resources in new ways. And so he has these innovation boot camps and startup incubators that operate kind of like a Shark Tank, but more inclusive. They used an idea developed at Google called the sprint process, where you kind of start backwards. You start at the problem instead of having, I have an idea for a solution. First you find the problem, and then you try to completely, fully understand it as much as you can, including all the factors surrounding it. And then you explore and develop creative ways to solve it. You use a lot of storyboarding, and then you create prototypes and you test them in real life, and sometimes you start over from scratch. This whole process usually takes for him about 5 days, and he's doing these in other parts of the state. I think they just did one in Hoona, and the winner gets mentorship and support to develop their business in real life. These are the sorts of things that, I mean, he was excited about the possibility of doing this in Cordova. I think it'd be a neat opportunity. There are many ocean clusters around the world, and he used the Iceland Ocean Cluster as an example. In Iceland, what they're doing is they have a incubation and co-working space where startups and entrepreneurs in a variety of fields that all share the same resource are co-located, and then the incubation center helps them work together. They offer research and consulting, and then they provide tours. So kind of tours ties into the tourism industry there. And what's coming out of it is Iceland is nearing 100% full utilization of the fish. So when the fish comes out of the ocean, there's almost no waste at the end of it. And they're doing this by bringing together all different kinds of industries, people that are making obviously food, but also cosmetics and medical products and other things.
I just want to throw something. The number is astounding. They've taken the cod value, ex water value, from like $2 now to like $16 or $18.
Yeah, it's incredible. And for comparison, in the US, we're estimated at about 65% utilization right now. So we have a lot of growth that we could be doing in that area. And Alaska is the #1 producer in value and in volume in the US. So it's the perfect place to be considering an ocean cluster in the US. So next we had a presentation and a panel on mariculture. This is a highlight for many in attendance. Julie Decker, she did the presentation. She's worked as a deckhand, a vessel owner, diver, and she's managed both seafood processing and nonprofits. So she has a really nice, well-rounded idea of the fishing industry. Currently, she's the executive director of the Alaska Fisheries Development Foundation, and she's working on the Alaska Mariculture Initiative. So this is a project to expedite and develop the mariculture industry in Cordova, or in Alaska. And they recently, they're funded by a NOAA grant, and they recently released a development plan with a goal of growing a $100 million mariculture industry in Alaska in the next 20 years. She gave a brief overview of popular forms of mariculture in the state. Oysters, clams, crabs, kelp, sea cucumbers, and mussels were part of that. And the opportunities appear to be great. Obviously, there's economic opportunity there, but there's also cultural opportunity and food security, industrial opportunity. We have so many assets, for example, in Cordova, vessels and plants that for much of the year go unused. The mariculture season is complementary to a traditional commercial fishing season, so this would be an off-season way to be utilizing those resources. There's also environmental resources. A lot of the things that they are farming are actually work for water filtration and their nitrogen fixing. And the tourism potential is also there. I can tell you firsthand, there's people that come in all the time asking for tours of real-life facilities like that in Cordova, and I think an oyster farm would be much more photogenic than what we have now. So by the numbers, I kind of gave you some of this information already, but I didn't get to talk about some things. The business owners were given an opportunity to introduce themselves and their business and announce any new projects that they were working on through our 60-second showcases, and we gave them 60 seconds to talk about whatever they want to talk about, and we encouraged them to wear funny hats and be entertaining. This was a neat way for them to really get the word out on what they're doing, and it kind of opened the doors of communication so that then after that they could maybe say, hey, I heard you were doing this. I'm thinking about something similar. Maybe we could work together. And that's really what we're trying to encourage. At the conclusion of the day, we also offered a networking event, like I mentioned, and the attendees got to talk, and so they'd just gotten through a whole day, 8 hours of just information, so it was nice to give them a way to kind of digest it, talking amongst themselves, and hopefully talking about more ways they could be working together. As I mentioned, the sponsors of the event were also crucial, and they provided the food facility and cash support. We had a great turnout. 65 people is a great size for an activity like this. We were able to really collaborate well in small groups and pollinate. And 100% of the surveyed attendees said that they were satisfied, they were happy with it, they thought it was a great event, and they'd recommend it to somebody else. A really important part of the event was our roundtable discussions, and this is where we executed our SWOT analysis, where we talked about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the Cordova business sector. So this was a very long list, and you all were given a one sheet in the meeting packet that has kind of a further breakdown, and that is even a condensed version. I have a lot of raw data here that I'm happy to share with anybody interested. In fact, I think it'd be probably great for whoever's going to do your comprehensive plan for the city. But so as far as the strengths and opportunities go, much of it's centered around the strong and safe community feeling, the fact that we're actually not quite as remote as sometimes we seem or we feel, and as long as we can kind of keep that, maintain that, people really felt it was a strong asset that we had diversified capabilities and facilities within the businesses that are locally owned here in Cordova. Obviously, our intact ecosystem and our access to outdoor adventure make quite an asset here. Profitable fishery, obviously. Also local control of key industries and a plethora of agencies with home offices and bases here is also an asset that a lot of people felt was maybe underutilized. And the desirable culture with a resourceful and creative group of residents that are also politically minded and want to be engaged. And then we talked about weaknesses and threats to economic growth. Again, a more complete list is on that one sheet in the meeting packet, and I also have an addendum that I can share with whoever's interested. That's why it looked like I had 80 slides. I don't really. So this touched on a few things. People felt that they needed support for new and growing businesses, as well as those looking to transition. That came up a lot. Workforce development, when we asked in our Cordova business survey if they had any trouble hiring, what was the problem, the largest answer, the most popular answer was that people had a bad attitude or no customer service skills in Cordova. So, and then right behind that was people not willing to relocate to Cordova, and then people not applying. So we have a limited labor pool here, we know that, but we can be doing more to prepare people for the workforce, and then also to train people currently in the workforce on how to be more successful in those positions through customer service training and other training opportunities. And I think continuing to work on enhancing our quality of life is going to make this a more desirable place to relocate to. So for those technical jobs that do need to be outside hires, people are more willing to relocate here. Working with businesses on tax reform, the businesses had a lot to say about tax reform and that being something that's needed. It's easy to say that, but there's actually a group of people on the Chamber Econ Committee who want to jump in and want to take a closer look and want to work with you guys to try to do that reform. So I hope that when that time comes, that the council is receptive and can work well with them. Volunteer fatigue. We depend on volunteers so much in this town. I know the chamber does. But we depend on volunteers to be our paramedics and our firefighters. These are extremely technical, life and death type jobs that require a lot of training and hold liability with them on a personal level. And these people get little to no recognition for what they do, and that's just one example. I think we can do better. I think we can, I don't have a magic answer for this, but I think it's a discussion that can help everyone if we can find a way to be recruiting volunteers more, recognizing volunteers more, try to spread the load between more people, because it's often the same people volunteering in different roles over and over again. I'm a mom, I'm a full-time job, I get it. We don't have a lot of time, any of us, but if there's a way that we can make that more worth it for people, that'd be great. And ferry and essential air service, our remote location makes us dependent upon outside entities to provide transportation of people and goods in and out of the community. And we've seen a lot of changes to our ferry system and air service in Cordova recently, and there's lots more coming. Businesses are showing concern about this, rightfully so. So I think, it's good for us to be aware of these issues and to kind of keep them front of mind when we're preparing for the future. Here we go. So we also asked about the future. Where do people see Cordova 5, 10, 20 years down the road? What potential businesses would they use if they were available? And I brought up this chart so that we can look back at it. And as we're looking at these next things, I want us to kind of ask ourselves two things. One, how can we bring more money into Cordova? And two, how can we keep it here longer? So that should be what this list can help us do. Expanded non-consumptive shoulder season tourism came up a lot. Some ideas included artist studio tours, more fiber art retreats, year-round birding tourism, temperate rainforest botanical tours, seeking out sailboat and pleasure boat tourists to make Cordova maybe one of their key stops, doing more bike tours and getting e-bikes going. All of this, we do have to be careful that we do it at a sustainable rate, so that our community and the lifestyle that we have here is not affected. So that's why they thought non-consumptive and on the shoulder season would be a good place to try to increase tourism. The group also saw a lot of potential not being fully utilized. Hangar space built at our public airstrip on Power Creek Road could open up Cordova to new options for travel. Waste was also a popular topic, mud, slugs, garbage, how we could be finding new ways to use canneries in the off-season, along with energy topics surrounding exploring alternative energy options like tidal and wind energy, and re-exploring solar and wind would be good. Topic of partnerships came up over and over again, specifically businesses partnering more with each other, people supporting businesses more, and the city making the most of its existing partnerships. There also are some needed industries and infrastructure on that list. There was talk about vocational education center here, maybe offering classes on aviation or mariculture or mechanics, cultivating some of the resources that we have in abundance, like a berry farm. They talked about breweries, distilleries, kombucha breweries, more Main Street service businesses. As far as infrastructures, people definitely mentioned the harbor, needing more there, and a covered boat yard so that they can be doing some work in a covered area on their boats. Community kitchen came up a lot. People feel like they need more indoor recreation options and more covered outdoor recreation options. We all know it rains. Dog park was a big one, and power alternatives, like I mentioned. And more support services. We've already mentioned the business development support, but also some social services, Big Brother, Big Sister, and possibly a youth center. And they also talked about trying to retain the quality of life and how that can really help to grow our economic opportunities in Cordova as well. So we have a lot going for us here, a lot worth fighting to maintain. And the good news is that we are a resilient community. We've gotten through a lot of challenging situations this town. So I'm sure we can get there, but it never hurts to be open to new ideas. And so I think this was a great exercise in doing that. And I think the key moving forward will be to be working together, engaging stakeholders every chance we get, and working to strengthen key partnerships. I want to thank the mayor and the council for your support at the chamber. We feel a lot of value came out of the Cordova Economic Summit, and in fact, there's some ideas there that have actually come to fruition already. There's e-bike rentals in town now, and CFRC is starting a youth center, so that's exciting. We're bringing in the Alaska SBDC. We're also trying to be agile and responsive to this information, so that's the Small Business Development Center. And they're going to be offering free one-on-one business counseling for business owners and people who are interested in starting new businesses. And there's going to be kind of some broader trainings involved that are free as well. We'd also like to start a business mentorship program and provide regular networking and training events. This was the Chamber's first event that really focused on economic development, and we're kind of dipping our toe into economic development here, and it got a lot of response, and it came out with a lot of positive impact. So it's really just showing us that there's a lot more work to be done here. We've been working to, it's just hard because we don't have any more staff to dedicate to any new programs, so we're gonna try to have to figure out how to juggle things even more, but what we really need is to have more staff. We've been working to increase our revenue from memberships and sponsorships, advertising and gaming, but without a dedicated staff member to do that, it's hard to focus on the programming that we need to do and also have time to do that. A more stable funding mechanism derived from the revenue from the accommodation tax would be a possible solution there. It would really be beneficial to the chamber, freeing up some resources to work on some more fundraising, so it'd be doubling whatever investment is given there, at least. So the rest of our focus could stay on these important programming. Business development and economic development, we're seeing how important it is. We're just starting to actually be able to give some time and resources to it, but not enough. We just don't have any more resources to give to it right now, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that the city can consider looking at that accommodation tax revenue, which has been going up a lot in the past 3 years. And during those 3 years, it's also been harder and more expensive to get to Cordova than ever. So it just shows that the chamber's doing something right. And we've been working really hard to try to increase the opportunities for the city through increased revenue and sales tax, which is, as Alan says, a low-hanging fruit and an easy way to try to increase revenue. The chamber's your partner to do that. So I'd like to, I mean, we've asked in the past for the city to begin funding its grant to the chamber based on the accommodation tax revenue. And that seems like a reasonable request considering the origin and intention of that tax when it was first passed in August 1999. However, even though that was the origin and intention of it, there's never been any correlation between the two. So I think it's time to look at that. And it would be a really good way to create incentive for the chamber to continue to create more and more revenue that way. And it would also kind of decouple or separate the business development funding from the rest of the city's budget up and down. I mean, if the major funding source for us is fish revenue, on poor fish years, we need the chamber to perform even more. So we really need to be, you know, having their funding come off of their performance, I think. I'm really grateful for this time to talk to you, and I'm available for any questions. And again, I'm happy to share more detailed information from the Economic Summit with that addendum, and also providing raw data.
Okay, council, you have questions? Councilman Guard or Allison?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Allison. Yeah, just a comment, I guess, more than a question, but I think one of the projects that the city and the chamber need to work on together and get going on is I'll just call it the downtown revitalization project of sorts. I'm sure the chamber has looked into that, but anybody takes a look up and down our First Street and even Second Street that had some businesses on it, and look at all the vacant buildings are for sale. You know, some of our businesses have expanded due to that, but there's still a lot of vacancies and real estate that's not doing much or is for sale at the current time. And any incentives the city can provide, I don't know what we can do, but maybe we can work together and come up with some ways to revitalize that area.
It's a good point, Councilman Allison, and what I don't know if you have access to the slideshow, and will this be available on the chamber website or?
I can do that for sure.
Maybe on the city website as well. That was one of the key points on opportunities, I guess, or one of the weaknesses is that there's no business incentives. And the meeting with Manager Lanning earlier today, Cordova businesses have been asking, and the state of Alaska is, I'm not going to say it's unique, but the state of Alaska doesn't have any incentives either. There's no tax incentives, no property tax deferrals. There's really nothing to help get businesses started. So that's a good point. Also, I think for the benefit of the councilman online, I just want to mention and thank the participants not only in this process, but also in the Chamber of Commerce, Osa Schultz, Wendy Rainey, Karen Kramer, deeply invested not only in their businesses and organizations, but put a lot of time and effort into the Chamber of Commerce, which is really rising. The numbers are pretty staggering. I think the accommodations tax 2016 was $120,000, 2017 $187,000. Yep. And there's definitely been a rise in the performance and capabilities and product of the Chamber of Commerce. That's been a real effort on Kathy's part and on the board's part. So thank you for that. And I know this council is very committed to partnering with the business community in ways that frankly I haven't seen in the community for a long time. And it's a good time to have a strong chamber. Other comments or questions, council? I also think it's appropriate to take this amount of time in a council meeting to have a presentation by the chamber who's representing, what's the membership now?
140.
140 businesses are represented by the Chamber of Commerce. So this is your connection to the business community. So thank you very much for putting the time and effort into the great presentation, Kathy. Some of these numbers are, in fact, could you scroll back real quick to those, the percentage responses to business growth and whatnot, they were all negative. There's something that jumped out at me there that I just wanted to point out real quickly.
1 second.
And business uncertainty is not unique to Cordova. That's one of the biggest things cited nationally by the Chamber of Commerce and across the country is that uncertain futures, regulatory business and business climates and so forth is one of the biggest barriers to business investment and growth. Sorry, anyway, the one that jumped out at me, the very smallest number was a minus 0.1% on businesses deciding whether they would grow or whether or not they would grow. And that's interesting because when you take a survey of businesses, some are gonna be positive and some are gonna be negative. So when you're kind of at zero, that means that pretty much as many businesses intend to grow in this community as shrink. And as Councilman Allison mentioned, there are some vacant storefronts, but there are also many businesses willing and making investments in our community. Even some that I'm aware of that I'm sure a lot of the community aren't. And we've also seen that over the last couple of years, every time a piece of vacant land or a city land disposal comes up, there's sometimes double-digit interest in businesses in those properties. So.
My presentation is stuck.
That's okay.
Sorry.
So that will be available. So
yes, there is an Economic Summit page on our website that's under events, and I will put it on there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council, from the chamber? All right, thank you, Kathy.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item is audience comments on agenda items. And if you could just use this microphone for the councilman online and state your name and residence for the record. Anyone? Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Bird, 101 Lake Avenue is my address. I'm here speaking as a Planning and Zoning Commission member in support of one of the resolutions, pieces of business you have to support the funding for a comprehensive plan to go into action this year. Resolution 07-1818, I think it is. And I just have a couple of things to say in support of it. I was one of the people who got to review all three of the proposals, and there was one that was clearly not very appropriate, and then I sort of struggled between the other two, but I found the Agnew-Beck one very much the best, and I think from their past performances in Cordova and other projects, they have the ability to sort of start without having to do a lot of background work. Their proposal gave me confidence that they would give us a plan that, in their emphasis, their finished product said that they would make it practical strategies and measurable anticipated outcomes. Basically, I read that as meaning easy to read and something that we can go back to and sort of check off. You know, a lot of comprehensive plans that get put together I find very hard to digest. Theirs that they did for Petersburg was seemed to be a very nicely done product that a lot of people across the board would be able to get the idea of what it would do. The other thing that I liked was that they had a whole list of questions that they would be asking, and a number of those were focused on the planning area. I think will really be helpful to P&Z in some of the struggles we've had with deciding what to do with various lands that the city still owns. How do we do the best planning process for that? So I hope that, I guess I trust that the city's budget, I understand it's proposed to come from the General Reserve Fund, and from past experience, I know that seems like a very appropriate place to fund these kinds of things, and I think it will be. I know we're struggling with funds, but you've got to sometimes spend money to make money or to make things happen and so on. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for your service on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I see others here. And I just want to remind that there is a vacancy on the Planning and Zoning Board, and I encourage consideration of that. It's a great way to learn about land use and contribute to your community, so I'd encourage you to consider that if you can. Other public testimony? Audience comments on agenda items?
Good evening, Gary Graham, 102 Kimmick Way, local business owner, 40-year Cordova resident. I have a few comments. I'm going to be reading from my notes here quite a bit. This old brain doesn't remember a lot of things. I have a few comments about the importance of having the Chamber of Commerce, and part of which was conveyed with Kathy's presentation here. I thought it was an excellent presentation. It's very clear to me that we need an entity working hard on economic development and small business support in this town. We need for the Chamber to have adequate resources and manpower to promote and sell Cordova. It is a known fact that people don't just happen to be driving through Cordova and find it amazingly beautiful and decide they want to come here for a vacation. One has to want to come to Cordova. When they do, they spend money in our hotels, B&Bs, restaurants, bars, and many other tourist-related businesses, which in turn increases our sales tax, accommodation tax, and vehicle rental tax revenues. We have a new community center that has the potential to draw meeting groups in and during the shoulder seasons or even during the winter. It takes an entity to make people aware of what we have to offer, hence the Cordova Chamber of Commerce. Excuse me. Cordova has been, and always will be primarily a commercial fishing town, but we're seeing an awful lot of political pressure trying to tear down and reallocate or just plain rob us of our commercial fisheries. When fishermen have a bad season, the entire town has a bad season. That's how much the commercial fisheries mean to this town. But we must continue to diversify or run the risk of the town drying up. The Chamber is doing more and more good work for Cordova, but there is only so much one full-time and one part-time employee can do. Kathy and her part-time assistant Laurel are continuously on the phone or out talking to people promoting Cordova and our businesses. They are mainly responsible for the increased revenues from occupancy and car rental taxes. I believe they can and they will do more. I was a council member in August of 1999 when we approved the ordinance creating the transient occupancy tax and the vehicle rental tax, which was supposed to help fund the part of the revenues were supposed to help fund the Chamber of Commerce. We took a lot of heat for this because business owners cried out that it would drive tourism from Cordova. It did not. Visitors expect to pay taxes and or fees when visiting another town and renting a car or a room. Reno, Nevada, Boise, Idaho, Seattle, Washington, which I have firsthand knowledge of, all charge approximately 30% in additional taxes and fees when renting a vehicle. There are other locations that charge more. Bed taxes are common everywhere, and people expect to pay them. Bed tax in Anchorage is 12%. Now, granted, that 12% is basically what people are paying here because Anchorage doesn't have a sales tax. So, but I've seen it a lot higher. And the Chamber needs a reliable and secure funding mechanism that will fully back their current and added efforts to sell Cordova to the public. I know the budget woes that we've got in Cordova now make it difficult to allocate any more out of the current revenues that we have, so I have a suggestion. I have for another pass-through funding source to fund the Chamber. The rage these days in all businesses and in government seems to be the fee. So I figure a fee of 1 to 3% that will fund the Chamber could be added to all accommodation and vehicle rentals. This would be a burden that would only be borne by the visiting public, and it would be far less than some other cities charge for these services. I don't have the numbers in front of me of what the potential revenue generated would be because I don't have the numbers for the two taxes now. But I think there are ways to work this out to where we can get at least have the one part-time employee at the Chamber of Commerce become a full-time employee, and possibility if this does work out to where it generates the revenue that I think it will, we may end up having to expand it even more. So, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. I want to thank you, Gary, as well for serving on the Health Services Board.
My pleasure.
I think you mentioned volunteer fatigue, but operating businesses like many I see in the audience and volunteering for our boards and commissions is a real commitment. So. Other audience comments regarding agenda items?
Real quick, Wendy Rainey, 2500 Orca Road. And I'm just here in support of the Chamber also. I'm a member of the Economic Committee. I participated in our Economic Summit. And being a business owner, it was extremely important for us to get together and communicate with other Cordova businesses. It's not rocket science. Some of us have been around for 20 plus years doing business in Cordova.
there's a way for us to help new businesses coming in, and that helps us because we see what's available out there. The only way that's going to happen is for us to continue to talk, and the best facilitator for that is the Chamber of Commerce. The summit was excellent. It was a positive way to get together, to see what's happening, to see what's new, to look at new enterprises that could be brought into Cordova. We all have grand ideas of things we'd like to do and how we'd like to expand, but sitting down in a session with other business owners and seeing, hey, we've tried that before, let's take that and look in a different direction. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We just need a strong facilitator, and the chamber needs to be funded in order for that to happen. It was a great way to talk to new businesses, and I encourage new businesses to come to Cordova, and I encourage expansion. I try to volunteer as much as I can for the community and the Cordova Chamber, and I'd like to see them get some more funding. It would really help the businesses expand.
Thank you, Wendy. And I want to thank you as well for your service on Parks and Rec. And, one thing that occurred to me during the chamber presentation, one of the metrics I didn't see was how many of the businesses in the community are locally owned, especially in the retail and whatnot. So I think the work at Venture Lodge, Powder House and whatnot, they're locally owned, and some of these businesses are organic. They started pretty much from nothing, from ground zero, and have built a huge, contribution to the community and business, and all the business community benefits from that. So, other audience comments regarding agenda items?
Hi. Kristen Carpenter, 507 4th Street, I guess, is the capacity that I'm speaking in. And so let's see, I have a list. I will echo the comments that have been made about the chamber so far. I don't need to repeat what people have said, but I think it's clear that there's really strong leadership and strong energy in the chamber right now, and it would be great to continue supporting that. So I will leave it at that. And then I wanted to also speak up in support of the comprehensive plan that's on the agenda tonight, the investment in the comprehensive plan. I want to echo what Nancy Bird said. I don't need to repeat all of that. I think I support all of what she said, but I want to support it for two reasons. One is I think the comprehensive plan is designed to be written around an inclusive process, and what we saw with the Cordova Center when this was built, I remember that meeting where they were trying to talk about where it should be located, and they had 3 sites on the wall, 3 big flip charts, and somebody said, what about this site? And they added it to that, and that's where we ended up putting it. And I think that's a great example of what happens when you bring all the minds to the table, all the good ideas to the table, and that's what this is about. So to the extent that we can get a great inclusive process and a strong plan, I think that would be really important. And I also think that the plan is meant to be an investment. I know it's a lot of money, I know it seems like a huge outlay, but it's an investment. And if you think, say it's a 5-year plan. Right now the comprehensive plan is 10 years old, so it could be a 10-year plan, but conservatively, if it's a 5-year plan, and you estimate that maybe you would be able to leverage, because you specify what's in the plan, you say these are city priorities, you take that to funders and say this is why we think this should be funded. Conservatively, you could probably get $50,000 a year. So that's $250,000, that's double your investment right there. So again, it could be longer than that, it could be more dollars per year. So I just urge the council to think of the comprehensive plan as an investment, because I think it will pay off over the long term. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kristen, and thanks for your service on the Health Services Board as well. Other audience comments regarding agenda items?
Thank you. Tom again, 907 Cliff Trail. I thought I'd take the easy route and let Nancy and Kristen go first, so I echo everything that they said. Just an anecdote. I was looking through our existing comp plan recently, and I think, well, this is old. I'm looking at it, and what were our priorities in 2008 for municipal facilities? It was to either relocate or construct new. The museum, the library, City Hall, and, well, there's more to it, but we're sitting in that building right now, flip the harbor. Top priority was the travel lift. Why have a travel lift? I guess my point is that prioritizing your goals in a comprehensive plan actually works. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom, and thank you for your work on the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. Yes, there is. Audience comments, other audience comments on agenda items? All right, Manager Lanning, did you have something? Okay. Chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. Cordova School District, and I think they're out right now. The superintendent is. I saw school starts August 22nd, so that's right around the corner. So be thinking about safe driving and start up a school. CCMC.
A few minutes. So the last time the board met was July 19th, and our next meeting is, that's right, yeah, it's August 30th, so we haven't met since then, but I can give you a few quick updates. Scott has resolved the internet services issue by signing a contract with CTC, and so we're now going to be getting internet services through Cordova Telephone Cooperative, and I think it's going to increase the bandwidth by quite a bit. I think he said that it's going up to 50 megabytes of bandwidth, whereas we had 20 before, so it's a huge increase in capacity. The cost is rising a little bit, but I think the FCC raised the cap on the Rural Healthcare Fund, so CCMC won't actually be paying more than before. We're going to get a little bit more assistance from that fund. The electronic health records system went live August 1st. There are definitely bugs. I think there are staff from the vendor that we're getting the software from who are on site trying to work through some of those bugs, but I think it's been a little bit, I don't know, maybe painful is too strong, but it's been challenging. We have had some more specialty clinics that are starting to happen on a more regular basis, on a quarterly basis, so OBGYN services and pediatric clinic is happening quarterly, so that's great. And Scott also signed an agreement with the family residency program in Anchorage, so we can have third-year physicians doing their residency come to a 1-month rotation and learn about rural healthcare. So not only are we getting extra help, it could be a recruiting tool, it could be a recruiting avenue for physicians who would consider living here. We're supposed to have the audit report by late July. We might have had it. To be honest, I don't know, but we obviously will be getting a report in August. We have another new board member, Greg Meyer, is now on our board, so we have a full medical center board, which is awesome. It's full until the election in March, so Gary Graham and Greg Meyer are filling 2 unexpired terms. And then our next board meeting is August 30th, so, and yeah, I haven't seen the financials. I mean, the last ones I saw were May, so we're obviously a couple months behind. I think that we were expecting to get some revenue that comes very occasionally by the end of the second quarter, so June 30th. So we're hoping that there's a little bit of an uptick, but yeah, we're going through a transition with a temporary CFO, doing the audit, all those things. So we're still in a little bit of flux, just trying to get the financials to a place where we have a little bit better handle on what we can predict from year to year. You know, we've got the new pharmacy. Things are changing at the federal and state level with Medicare and Medicaid, so that's always going to affect us. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions, council? Or, okay, I was just curious, Kristen. I think on the FCC, those reimbursements, there was a big lag, and they've been sitting on a big chunk of that for a while. Did that come through? Or?
I think it did. Okay. Yeah, I think they got that part resolved too. Okay. That they agreed to release that money.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
And our student council representative is on break until school starts up again. So consent to calendar. Just one item, which includes excused absences from the June 20th regular meeting.
Yeah, I better call the roll. James Weiss is absent, Ken Jones is absent, Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yeah.
James Burton is absent, Jeff Guard. Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Okay, consent
take 10
calendar.
minutes to back and forth between the screens.
Got it. Consent calendar is approved.
Okay, so we've missed a few meetings and we've had some minutes back up. So this would be the approval of the minutes of May 24th special meeting, May 25th special meeting, June 6th public hearing, June 6th regular meeting, June 20th public hearing, June 20th regular meeting, and the June 27th special meeting.
I move to approve. Second.
Motion to approve in a second. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the minutes are approved and submitted. Consideration of bids. The first item is a direction to the manager to negotiate a contract for the comprehensive plan update. It's on page 15 of the packet.
I move to, how do I say this? Oh, it's down here. I move to direct the city manager to negotiate a contract with AgriVet Consultants, Anchorage, Alaska, to provide consulting services to update the 2008 comprehensive plan per RFP 18-2 for a sum of money not to exceed $22,146.00.
And just for clarification, it's $122,146.00. No cents. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what you said.
I thought I heard 22,000.
Oh,
It may have
plus 100.
It may have been my.
1,000.
1,000, yes, correct.
I just wanted to make sure I corrected my hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilman Schaefer, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'd like to, I guess, maybe echo the sentences that, or the sentiments that were expressed earlier, that this is an investment in the community. It'll help prioritize how we move through our next projects with the city. And I like that they had a very strong public input component, and public being part of the process. So that's why I'm in support of this.
Okay, Councilman Meyer?
Same reasons, everyone coming up to in support of it, and also what Ann said. I also went through the 2018 plan just to kind of see what it looked like and how well it has worked out in the past, and it does seem like we've actually completed a lot of those projects. The growth part isn't still there. It seems like we're still kind of where we're at, but the travel lift and this new building, those were big ones on there that have been completed, so it'd be nice to move forward with the updated plan.
Online, Councilman Guard or Allison?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is David.
Yeah, Councilman Allison.
I support this as well. It's, it is an investment. We had talked about for several years, the council's been talking about appropriating $50,000 a year to work on this. Had we done that when we first started, we'd have been way over our 122 anyway. But I think it's a good thing to get it all done at once and move forward. And it's an investment that I think we need to make. So I'm in support of this.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, can we do a roll call vote just so we have two on?
Yes. So for item 13, we're gonna go, Melina Meyer.
Yes.
Ken Jones is absent. Ann Schaefer.
Yes.
Jeff Guard.
Yes.
David Allison.
Yeah.
And James Weiss and James Burton are absent. Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, thank you. The next item is item 14 on page 18 of the packet. That's direction to the manager to negotiate purchase of a refuse dumpster truck.
And if you have the packet with the double, it was amended a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Can we move forward on this because we only have 4?
It is a transfer from the general reserve.
Well, not yet. This is just the, yeah, to say yes or no to him negotiating the contract.
Yeah.
Then there's an ordinance later with the funding source. The transfers from the permanent fund ordinances require 7 yeses on second reading and can be moved forward less than that, you know, just a simple majority on first reading.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I move to approve the manager to negotiate purchase of a refuse dumpster truck. Let's see, with Yukon Equipment Wasilla to provide 1 new Libri Vitka Starlight 4B cubic yard front loader refuse body on a Peterbilt, factory dump. For a sum not to exceed $269,492.00.
Oh, second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Schaefer, would you like to speak to your motion?
Well, it sounds like it's only a matter of time until it's going to have to be replaced. And then there's putting in a lot of human and financial resources into keeping the current trucks on the road. So I mean, yeah, budget's tight, but I mean, we're not necessarily saving any money by dumping money into something that's gonna not work for us. So it's work.
So I guess we're probably gonna have a larger discussion later on about maybe the alternatives and the options to pay for it. Is that right? So I don't have too much to say about it. It's a lot of money for a dump truck. So maybe the manager could talk a little bit about the needs of this dump truck, or maybe we could get a little more information.
We went out for RFP. We received 2, right? One was 50,000 more, it was 320. And what you do is you do a base package type truck. You put on the equipment that fits your pickup and delivery method in the community, and what those requirements are, you go out to RFP, and then you accept bids. This was the low responsible bid on this truck. You know, there's very little I can say about the cost. The cost is what it is. They're very expensive because of the type of truck and the hauling capacity and the equipment needed on the truck. They're just very expensive, and you know, not everybody in the world outfits one of these. Plus we have delivery charges and all of those things. I think our options for funding this, which is going to be a later discussion, you know, fall into several categories. We've been putting away depreciation money, and there is a little bit of that. But in this case, we haven't, you know, and I'm going to speak to this later. I think we can responsibly buy this truck, and, you know, the options of how we either repay the fund or we use part of the fund or all of the fund and those things, and we can have that discussion later time. But you know, I don't know how to address the cost. It is what it is. I mean, there aren't other suppliers of this truck. We had 2 responsible bids, and you know, we can go put a whole bunch of money in a truck that we have, but you know, at a certain point in time, they're just worn out. And the one of them we have, probably more than we have, are worn out.
So we have the one that we'd be replacing is the used one that we purchased, the 2015.
Yeah.
And so the other one, that's a 2000.
It was kind of worn out when we got it.
Right, so the 2001 dump truck is still in decent condition, or how long do we think that one's gonna last us?
Well, Rich, I'll have to answer that.
When are we going to buy another one?
We're replacing the 2001.
Oh, we're replacing the 2001.
Okay.
We bought the other one as sort of a stopgap measure in 2015 to.
So in the future, we're probably gonna have to replace that one.
Absolutely. We should be on a capital replacement plan of X amount of years for all the equipment. And raising enough money in the enterprise fund to pay for it all. That's what we're gonna talk about at budget time.
Okay, further discussion, Councilman Allison, Gard?
Yeah, Councilor Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I can't say as I support this motion at this point in time, particular for several reasons. Number one, we haven't had our discussion yet on what we're going to be doing with our waste. I think we need to have a workshop or part of our budget discussions or something on our whole refuse situation. Are we done baling? When we quit baling temporarily, we were going to have a discussion on whether that was our final decision or not. At that time, we also discussed, it's going to have more wear and tear on the trucks. We knew that was going to be one of the things, and we just never had that discussion. I think this thing is 6 months out either way. I think it needs to be discussed within the enterprise fund as part of the budget process. I need to be convinced that we looked at other options other than putting an RFP out for a new truck. Did we look at options for sending this one out to get professionally overhauled, or bringing somebody in to professionally overhaul it? We contact Waste Management to see if they were ordering 12 trucks and could order 13, and we buy one from them. I don't know. I think there's other options, but I think it deserves a bigger discussion, and I'm not in support of moving forward with a $300,000 purchase of a truck at this point in time until we've had that bigger discussion.
Further discussion, Council?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions along the same line. When we stopped baling, whether it's temporary, permanently, or whatever, we stopped baling and we were going to take a look at what our increased equipment costs, or basically what our costs were, doing analysis of, where we're using up landfill faster, not baling, where we're using more equipment costs, not baling, where was the breakdown between fixing the baler and doing it this way. So I'd like to see a cost-benefit analysis on this for what it's costing us compared to having the baler.
Okay, I think from the council discussion, I think you've provided some insight and expectations. Any further discussion? Yeah, why don't we do a roll call again?
Does anyone?
Well, let me try it. All those in favor?
No, it's okay, I'll do a roll call, I didn't mean that, I meant, did anybody want to refer it or do anything?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of creating a pause. Council could refer this to council for the information requested. I'm seeing nods.
Yeah.
Can somebody
So
say
that's a motion to refer.
Yeah, motion to refer back to staff.
I second.
Have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Manager Lanning.
I think when we switched from baling to hauling, we provided an analysis of the costs of hauling, wear and tear on the trucks. I think we provided that, So we'll try to, I'll try to find that again and send that back to you, and if it's not exactly what you're asking for, we'll make some additions to it to be able to answer those questions.
I think what you're talking about is what you guys projected our costs would be on it. But we talked about getting a better look at them as time went by to see how factual those costs were, or the estimates were.
Yeah, I think that's correct, and we'll look at what we had and what we said, and we'll put something together for you.
Yeah, and what might be helpful is if Manager Lanning circulates that other analysis, then council, if you want to just shoot him additional questions or information, we can do that. Okay. Right, should be reports here. Okay, reports to officers.
And we have 14A, so you have to go back to your front page.
That's right, so we have 14A, which is the direction to the manager to negotiate a contract for consulting services for 2019 Builds Grant application. And that's the supplement to the package. And the reason that was arranged that way is because it's been so long since we had a meeting, so we kept the agenda and packet intact and then just added to it. So this would be page 19-1 in the supplement at the front of your packet.
I move to direct city manager to negotiate a contract with P&D Engineering to provide consulting services to develop and submit a 2019 build grant for Cordova South Harbor dock replacement project for a sum not to exceed $28,950.00.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Schaefer, would you like to discuss your motion?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Just clarification. So how much are the build grants are? It's five, or I can't remember how much the build grants were. I'm getting the tier ones and the build.
It's kind of, you can make up your number.
Oh, that's right. So it's the tier ones that are the 5 million and the 5 million match,
right?
And then it's the build that, okay,
right.
Yeah, that's what
this is kind of a, you know, if you remember, this would be funded from the harbor, but if you want to participate in this arena of funding, and there may be other federal sources coming through, you can see the opportunity when you have, I'm going to use CEC here, when you participate in these processes, you never know what's going to happen, and you know, they've received a $6.2 million award as a group, and there have been other things that have unfolded since that award that are helpful to us. So this is something, I see this as an annual expenditure until, if and when we receive one, or just get tired of spending the money at some point, or we've made other arrangements. I envision this as a twofold process. The first part of the process says we avail ourselves of the $5 million state grant, do a $10 million project, apply for the build grant because it's all going to be in the time frame, adjust our request based upon a further conversation about improvements to the harbor, both sides, and then adjust that grant accordingly. But you know, people participating with the consultant here, first of all, P&D did the harbor study for us. They have a good handle on everything that's going here. They had a great proposal, very focused, but I think if we're gonna proceed, we have to take this kind of a risk in particular. So, and we haven't discussed it a budget, but we, you know, the first July 19th was the deadline for the last one. Obviously, we couldn't meet that deadline, so we want to have someone geared up. We want to spend a long time on this, getting it right and getting it submitted. So we want to get somebody under contract now, dedicate their team to it, come down, we go through the process, just like the comp plan. You know, this is going to be a year-long community process to get that thing written.
Thank you.
If it's helpful to council, one of the rationales or business tools I kind of use to assess investments like this is if you spend $30,000 and you think that that gives you a 1 in 100 chance of getting $3 million, then that is a good bet. Las Vegas will tell you to take that every time. And when you look at this administration, there are indications that they want to invest in rural American infrastructure. That might be I'd say 1% is probably on the low side. Further discussion, council?
Did this go to the Harbor Commission? Is that the amount where it's coming from?
No, we went out to RFP on this independently.
I mean, where the money's coming from. So did they?
This has not been formally approved by the Harbor Commission just because of timings of meetings. I think we certainly anticipate that this would be approved by the Harbor Commission and has been sort of bandied around for quite a while. And I think, Tony, help me.
What's that?
With the Harbor Commission, where are they at?
Well, I've talked to a majority of just talking over other meetings, and it's well worth it. Like Clay said, the odds are good.
Just for clarification, are you asking if it would be funded out of the Harbor Enterprise Fund or?
That too. I was just curious if it
Yes, that's what it'll be funded out of.
Okay, and that's a good question.
We're just approving going forward from the council in the process, so we can negotiate the contract.
Okay. Further discussion, council? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Gard, I'm not hearing a yay or a nay on the votes.
That one.
I just gotta get between screens.
Okay, sorry. Okay, great. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, back to reports of officers. Mayor's report. It has been some time since we met. I have a written report that's kind of dated now. I wanted to add a few items to it. First, I wanted to speak to the Chamber of Commerce, and having participated a lot over the last 16, 17 years, for a few years as the board president and then as a board member, there has been an ebb and a flow to the Chamber, and it has had a dramatic impact on the community as the capabilities of the Chamber rise and fall. Currently on the board, as are several in this room, and the Chamber is healthy and vibrant, and it is impacting the economy. They operate at essentially less than a full-time employee equivalent on city staff. They don't have a stable, performance-based, incentivized funding stream. And what I mean by that is, having participated in many budget cycles, it's really been a yearly request. Sometimes it was tied to specific goals or tasks like creating a new DVD, so forth. When you put a percentage of a revenue base that the Chamber impacts, like the accommodations taxes, that incentivizes them to grow the revenues, and that benefits both the city and the Chamber, regardless of what the percentage is. And for that 6% additional tax for those businesses, I'll let the Chamber argue for what that percentage should be, but when you can see big jumps, as you heard, in those revenues in a time when transportation is actually getting more difficult, that's a really positive sign in the current economy. And I think we're also facing a lot of state and regional issues in transportation, in state funding, in business opportunities. So it's great to see the council and manager and city staffs and chambers focus and collective effort to grow our economy. The Department of, so I was just recently
nominated to sit on the Department of Energy's, it's called the Electricity Advisory Committee, and I just received a confirmation from Secretary Perry this week. And I think it's mentioning just because it is an opportunity to really showcase Cordova's energy and communications system and the infrastructure. As Alan mentioned, we had the $6.2 million grant that has brought quite a collection of PhDs in and out of the community quarterly for meetings, and pulled in other organizations, and that is really snowballing into a lot of attention on other opportunities here. And we just got, we're looking at a grid scale battery. We had $500,000 of funding for that. As we reviewed the economics, they weren't as favorable as we'd originally anticipated. We just got an additional $325,000 in funding this week. And when you position yourself and have a strategy and execute it, those good things can happen. I've been working with some of our processors and stakeholders on an op-ed for the hatchery system in Prince William Sound. It's been taking a beating from, frankly, some Board of Fish members and the Anchorage and mainland media. And I think we all saw that emergency order consideration by the Board of Fish to reduce the approved hatchery releases out of Prince William Sound. So as I got some assistance putting together the facts on the health and strength of the wild stock runs as the hatchery releases have increased. It's interesting. So hopefully we're getting that placed in ADN to kind of just put some facts out there and to advocate for the public process and science-based decisions. The science centers, both in Prince William Sound and Sitka Sound, are studying these impacts. Fish and Game continues to monitor and whatnot, but that is a reasoned approach that if there are negative impacts, then you manage to that. But to make, kind of arbitrary decisions is very dangerous. So. Mayors are and are expected to be politically neutral. However, when candidates do come to town and express an interest in Cordova, I do everything I can to get the word out and maximize community participation, showcase what Cordova has, and communicate the goals and objectives to the community. So we've had Meade Treadwell was here this week running for Lieutenant Governor. Representative Stutes was here several weeks ago. I'm sorry, for governor. Representative Stutes was here several weeks ago. Rich Walker's running for representative in our district, and they've all visited Cordova. And Governor Walker's staff have reached out. He is trying to get a visit to Cordova scheduled as well. So we had contact from the Navy, the Northern Edge staff. And they reached out to invite us to an open house on one of their vessels at Anchorage and provide some feedback for their 2019 Northern Edge. Unfortunately, myself, Manager Lanning, Vice Mayor Allison, none were able to attend on fairly short notice. But we did encourage them to follow through with their commitments to coming to Cordova and engaging with us. I just wanted to mention on the council approved the Agnew-Beck, but we do have a current study posted on the city website that was the comprehensive Southfield development process. And they did 3 good public outreaches there, wrote a great comprehensive, very readable summary of what the community wanted. And that was, I think, the real active stakeholder engagement that Kristen was talking about. And that always yields a good product. So. And then I think that's about all I had for now. I just want to remind council that I know there's been a lot of concerns again about management on the flats and so forth. This is not necessarily off-season politically. We do have John Bitney on staff. If council has concerns about various items that impact the community, it's not inappropriate at all for us to be sending letters and concerns on subjects. So I try to keep up with things and communicate on behalf of the city for council. But if we're missing anything, that's all I had unless there are any questions. I did want to thank Emily for being here as well. There's been, various media representatives over the years, but I really appreciate she attends many community events. And when candidates have come to the community, she's covered that, comes to the council meeting. So thank you. It helps communicate to the community. All right, manager's report.
We've talked a lot about the chamber tonight, rightly so, and we talked about the public accommodation surtax. It was 131 in 15, it went down to 120 in 16. In 17 it says 187, and then we have 117 budgeted for the following year. It's I have to try to figure out what appears to be an anomaly for 17. Is that the first full year of the Cordova Center, or the second full year? Really our efforts collectively to fill the space. And then the vehicle rental surtax went from 11 to 16. So it went up in the year that the accommodations tax went down. And then an anomaly of $1,200 in the following year. So we'll have to try to delve into that a bit more and see what we can figure out about that, and based upon how you want to fund the chamber. So it's a good cooperative effort, and my attendance at meetings, I go as an ex officio, and I'm sure impressed with the progress over the last couple of years. So I'd like to touch base real quickly. First of all, I'm going to be gone for 10 days from the 17th to the 27th, as I've let you know before. So I'll be leaving on the plane on Friday. Our budget, there's an awful lot of talk, and probably, instigated by myself. But I don't want anybody to get the impression that as a local government, we're destitute, that we're so far out on the limb that we're in trouble. We're not in that condition. We're in the condition of, right now, of council making the commitment that you're going to be a $9.97 million local government, or a 10.6 local government, or an 11 point. Then the question is, how do we get there? And we have, if you look at our strategic plan, the very things that we've talked about are the things that are going to be helpful to us. For example, tourism. I've touched base with you before about, making assumptions about planes and ferries being full, all of them, new people coming to Cordova. We can accommodate 112,000 people in a year. That's all you can get here. And so knowing that number, we're somewhere south of that number. So what's our possibility, and how do we take advantage of that, and whether we do events and promotions? I talked about doing a committee, and had we progressed on that, we'd still be a year or so out from having a good event. So all of these things, all of these improvements, all of these budgets, I hope we never take those in an isolated circumstance and say, oh gosh, because we spend this, it's gonna sink the ship. It's all a process, and it's all a continuing process that gets adjusted every year. Now, we said we were going to adjust in 19, and we're adjusting in 19. How we calculate the budget and what our priorities are. So I just don't want anybody to have the impression that we're destitute. We fund 41% of our budget to help other entities. And we've talked about maintaining that number or reducing that number. And it looks like, maintaining the school district number, your priority is full funding. CCMC is financial sustainability on their own part. If you get that number down to 300, we're 300 more, and our budget's really good. We're in good shape. So just trying to take it all in context here. But I think the important thing to notice in any community, what creates buzz, what creates life, what creates money, is if people and even residents see that you're making progress. How good did everybody feel about the pavement on the Fish and Game corner? Wasn't that a good thing? I mean, that brightened everybody's day up for a couple of days. That little bit of progress, that's the kind of excitement you want to build in your community. And all of these things that we're doing are designed for that specific purpose, in addition to improving the health of our community.
Thank you. And I'll revert for just a second. The same with the Adams sidewalk. And I remember planning staff, Sam, coming to council. Do you want to do this? It's going to take a lot of effort, but it's basically a 3-to-1 match. Brought in several $100,000 of state money, and now that really highly trafficked stretch of sidewalk is getting upgraded. We have a business that's just done a beautiful job of restoring that whole side. I see that every day, and it's just, there's a lot of positive things in play. And I hope that the budget process goes a little, you have all the volunteers and stakeholders here that have encouraged council to make investments. Council budgets to make those investments. They plan strategically to make those investments. And when it comes to revenue time, you get a whole different group of people in the community all arguing against any individual increase in revenue that impacts them. And, the council, it's not the council's fault that you got set back $360,000 on your budget this year. And that draws you off a strategic plan, and it makes it difficult to make headway when you have really tight margins. So that's why I do feel kind of positive and have a theme, and it is, you're the people that are putting a lot of scarce time into volunteering and looking out for the community's future. And I think there's a lot of alignment between council, the manager, myself, and the boards and commissions. And somehow we have to communicate better with the community or pull in those stakeholders, but keep the community moving in a direction. When I get in the light rail in Seattle and I see kids fighting over a pack of seaweed and know that there is an existing billion-dollar market for clean mariculture and aquaculture, and we have a really great weather pattern for some of those, and there are new oyster farms that opened this summer, very close to town here. There are investments and opportunities happening, and it's just, if we can position for those, it just got a lot of opportunity. Sorry. Clerk's report.
Okay, Rich, my feel good is gonna be that gym floor. You gonna make it happen? By the time the volleyball has a tournament?
We're pouring concrete tomorrow. It's gonna be a concrete floor, right?
No. The gym floor? Are you losing your mind? Okay, so if anybody was looking at all the ads recently that Tina's been putting in for the expiration of the redemption period for foreclosures for 2016 tax year, it just expired and didn't get paid. And in 16 years doing this, we've done that one time in 2003 on a piece of land.
Yeah.
So this is a building. So I've got an email here from the attorney, and they're looking into it, and we don't have to do anything immediately, but you'll be seeing things coming forward, actions that we have to take, should take, make decisions on, whether there's a public purpose for it or not. So it's the Coho building here, the Cordova house. So I'll keep you guys informed of what's happening with that. And speaking of property tax, August 31st is the first half due date that's coming up, so there'll be some ads around, probably in the Cordova Conversation and posted around town, and so hopefully some citizens are listening just in case they put their bill away and forgot about it. First half is coming due. And then if you've noticed, there's been some early voting going on. The state primary is August 21st, and they'll have the full primary election upstairs in the education room. But Ruth Steele is doing the state early voting Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. So she's up there if you want to go take care of that, the fishermen while they're in town or whatever.
That's the education room upstairs?
is for the actual day of.
Okay.
She's just up in the atrium upstairs.
Okay, great.
And I wanted to, otherwise I was thinking that what else has my department been working on? We've been doing a lot of packet and meeting prep and then announcing that meetings are canceled. And one of those times, of those last 3, Leif handled all that for me because he was gonna be doing the meeting, so I wanted to call him out and thank him again for that. And I'm glad we're knocking this one out tonight. That's all I have.
Okay. Gosh, it's been so long, I have to keep reverting. So DOT, we've gotten 2 notifications, probably the city as well. They're still, correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, but they're still looking at the culvert replacement at Fleming's Pit and paving from, essentially from the ferry dock turnoff down to the fish cleaning station. And then also they've got, they have funded for next year the, putting a 5-foot lift on the Power Creek Road, basically from kind of the Hatchery Creek culvert area onto where it's washing out to that upper road. There's still quite a bit of footwork to do on our part. There's Forest Service, EAC Corporation, and still some design work to do there, but those are good things. That's good for our energy supply and hopefully for the fish resources there that are taking a beating, so. Staff quarterly reports are included. Any questions or comments, Council?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Allison.
A few questions, maybe comments too, but on the report. The first one is on the financial report. Not a question, but I guess request. If at some point in time, before we do our budget or finalize our budget, if we could get a hard to describe on the phone, I guess, but a spreadsheet that lists our combined treasury accounts and our combined permanent fund account, and it separates that out by reserved and non-reserved. In other words, I'd like to see Harbor Enterprise Fund Depreciation Fund, where that's at and how much is in it. The same thing with the refuse, where is that at and what's in it? Which, you know, is that in the permanent fund? Is that in the general fund? How much is that? Because of that $8,100,000, some of that is, I'm assuming some of that is the refuse landfill closure fund. Some of that is the harbor depreciation fund. Some of that is, you know, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense, Alan? I don't know if John is there or not, but I'd like to know what of that money that we have in our accounts, what is really already reserved for something or allocated to something, and what isn't.
I know exactly what you're asking.
Okay, that's on the finances, and that wasn't really a question. The other question I had was on the EMT or the EMS, fire and EMS report. Just recalled several years ago, the ambulance, are we still billing for that? I know there was a big pain getting that billing. Are we still billing for that? And if so, I'm assuming that's going into an account reserved for them, for the EMT?
Yes, it's going into account, and I don't know the answer if we're actually doing that building or we're having a third party bill it.
As long as it's being billed. There were several years when nobody was billing for it. We were just doing it for free. And, you know, insurance companies, mine for one, were willing to pay but weren't getting billed. So I know that was a big process for several years. We were trying to get that and, you know, do the HIPAA and this and that and everything else. It finally got through, and I just making sure it was being done, or something needs to be done. We need to do it because that's a lot of money that comes from outside the community through insurances and such that I just haven't seen a balance on that fund, which would be in my previous request here a few minutes ago. So
Yeah, I have confirmation for you. I'll get it.
And my third thing was just a comment on Chief Hicks' police report. There's been some chatter around town about our new officers hiding out and ambushing people and having a quota of dollars to make. And I just appreciate the chief's report and that we had a previous chief that his primary paragraph was how much money they made in that quarter, and Chief Hicks doesn't stress that at all, and I certainly like our community to be assured that we don't have a quota for our officers to make before they can, get off on Friday afternoon. Just want that to be clear with the community that that's not one of our purposes, is to make revenues by writing tickets.
That is definitely not one of our purposes.
Well, that report had a pretty sizable number of warnings in there. So, thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Clay.
Thank you, Councilman Allison. I don't know that I think it's been some while since there's been a bond maturation. I think that's a one-sheeter that has all the bonds and when they mature. And I just...
Should be in the budget book, right?
Well, in the budget, we put all the balances for the funds, and probably some of those are not as spelled out as Councilman Allison wanted, with dedicated reserves for particular things, and been asking for that for a while, but we'll make that information available to you on an ongoing basis as we do the budget. And then the debt schedule is in the budget. I just don't
okay, great, yeah. It just seemed like there was a bond or two that were maturing either next year or the year after. So. Okay.
Yeah, and those are relatively small ones.
Yeah, they were fairly small.
The big ones are a little bit farther out.
Is there other council comments or questions on the staff reports?
I was just gonna comment about the volunteer fire and EMT department, and they put a lot of hours in there, and it's recorded on here every time and we see it, and thank you to everyone that volunteers for that service.
Further comments? Okay, we have items under correspondence and ordinances and resolutions. Item 24 on page 60. Let's see, we had...
Before we get to the ordinances, can we talk a little bit about the correspondence letter on the bears? And maybe get an update about
absolutely
the bears from the manager?
What would you like to know?
There's been a lot of talk around town, a lot of concern about the bears. In this letter, it talked about bear-proof containers. Just a little update if someone's listening on the phone that has concern about it, that we're trying to address it.
We respond to every call that we get. It was said to me, whether this is accurate or not, that trash is a big reason we have more bears out in the open. It's a big barrier, of course, but why more, or you see more. We have looked at, and we're examining how we pick up our trash, where our refuse is dumped, all of those things. We have pricing on bear-proof containers that any individual in town, if they wanted to purchase one, they could do so, whether it's through us or somebody else. Bear-proof containers, of course, create more difficulty because we hand dump a lot of individual counts. But we're also looking at collection points where there's lots of individual containers into a larger bear-proof container. So I think we're looking at all of that stuff, but much of this is about money, being able to have a proper receptacle and additional time spent on it. So that's what I can tell you.
And is the fire or the police department working with the troopers to relocate or take
Yes.
some of the bears? I guess.
Yes.
Track them again.
I think everybody in the enforcement business gets their crack at a bear regularly, you know, if it's a habitual bear. So everybody does their part, and we're doing our best to keep them away from getting in trouble. But you know, I've lived in bear country for many years, and the solution in many of those communities was an ordinance that required everyone, including the city, to have bear-proof containers, period. So I don't think we're there yet.
All right, I just want to get an update if people are watching and listening. I know it's been a big concern, and I've heard about it, and I think everyone's heard about it.
Yeah, there are definitely many sides of the story. I met with Charlotte Westing, the habitat biologist, and have had some members in the community approach me, and you know, they've expressed concern and they've had bear incidents, but they've also said that they have left trash out on their porches. They've left thawed out freezer meats on the porches, and there's a lot larger number of people raising poultry and stuff in their yards that also attracted them. So, and it's a big barrier, so it's kind of a perfect storm. So I appreciate though that there may be an opportunity to purchase bear-proof dumpsters as a business. Did you say that it makes them harder to collect from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're gonna dump one of those containers, you have to have a specialized dumping. You can't just throw it on the trunk and throw it over. It's a little more difficult, a little more time consuming.
Okay. Any other questions on correspondence, council? Kind of blitzed through those, so. Okay, ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 1171, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing the transfer of $269,000 from the General Reserve Fund to the Refuse Enterprise Fund for the purchase of the refuse truck. Let's see, now we referred the first action, so.
I think the best thing to do would be put it and, you know, move it and then postpone it until that other item, 14, comes before you again, or on the same date as that. Either pick a date, or pick a meeting, or just say.
So postpone until the consideration of the RFP.
Yes. But you have to move it first, move to approve it first, to get it on the floor.
Oh, I see. So I move to approve,
I don't know if you did for
do we?
I don't know. I think you can just postpone it. I think you can just postpone it.
Okay, so I move to postpone ordinance 1171 until consideration of the bid.
Okay, the RFP for the purchase of that truck, yeah. Okay,
Second.
have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Sorry, we didn't catch that, Councilman Guard.
I'm sorry it takes me so long to get back and forth between the screens and stuff. I'm not very technologically savvy, but let me be clear. I'm voting on tabling this, or I'm voting on moving this forward?
You're postponing this because earlier in the meeting, you referred the award of the RFP negotiations back to staff. So the motion is to...
I understand that,
yeah,
but
and then
have a hard time hearing
exactly.
a lot of stuff because people aren't speaking into the microphones very well.
Okay.
Wasn't clear on what we're doing.
Okay, I'll try to encourage that. So this motion on the floor is to postpone this ordinance until council reconsiders that request for proposals.
I understand, thank you.
So
Okay,
it was a yes vote from you, right, Councilmember Guard?
Yeah.
Okay,
okay.
that motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay, next item is Resolution 07-18-18. And this is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending the 2018 budget by appropriating $122,146 from the City of Cordova General Reserve and transferring it into the transferring it into the General Projects Fund to complete a comprehensive plan update.
Move to approve resolution 07-18-18.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Councilman Meyer, would you like to speak to your motion?
Like we spoke all about before, it's good investment and moving forward on a plan.
Further discussion, council? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Okay, so it was the general fund reserve, not the general reserve fund, just making that clear.
That's correct.
Okay, and the reason it's a roll call vote is because it's unbudgeted money that we're spending, so that's why it's a roll call. So on resolution 7-18-18, David Allison,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
and then the others are absent. Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, resolution 08-18-19. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending the 2018 budget by appropriating $20,000 from the City of Cordova General Fund Reserve and transferring it into the number 401 fund in order to contribute funds for an economic analysis of a Prince William Sound borough.
Move to approve resolution 08-18-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Meyer, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think we need to have a study done, including Girdwood, so we know what kind of position that our borough would be in. I think that we'll probably have to do another study, a more detailed one, depending on what the local boundary commission says about the boundary of including Valdez, not including Valdez, but I think this is a start to get some information on what it would look like adding Girdwood to the borough.
Okay.
Proposed borough.
Further discussion, council? Councilman.
Got one quick question, if we can. Total dollars needed for this study was $48,000, if I'm right.
I believe.
How did we pick 20,000 for Cordova being one of 3 communities to fund this instead of like splitting it 3 ways evenly or something?
Assistant Planner Leif is speaking to them.
So that was just the number proposed, and then there's the updated letter, which I think was provided at the meeting. I forgot to get an electronic copy out to people, but in their update, I believe the total was 54, and that's the study without Valdez. So without Valdez, it's basically Girdwood, Cordova, and Whittier. Whittier has a smaller, so they're asking for 25,000. That's the most up-to-date number that they're requesting.
From my understanding, they were gonna Girdwood was gonna like finance the overhead and some other
So
charges.
There's 2 parts of the study. They have the whole piece about them becoming a city, which is separate. We aren't paying for any of that. And they're covering some of the overhead. They're contributing to part of that 54,000 at $20,000. Whittier at $9,000. So that's kind of how it's separated out. And the difference between Whittier and Cordova and Girdwood is based on population.
And so it looks like they actually requested 25, and here it says 20. I don't know if that's
Because
worth noting.
it's my fault. I wrote it before and didn't update it based upon this memo, and because we went through these packets and I just didn't update this piece of it. My apologies. It would be, you know, if the request is 25.
But we could probably amend that too if we wanted it to be 25, or
Yes.
a council member wanted to amend it to 15, or whatever amount we wanted to contribute, I guess.
Okay, because you're online.
I'm just trying to figure out where all these numbers come from, and if we're considering a borough without Valdez in it, is the only thing we're considering?
We're considering an economic study based upon a borough without Valdez in it.
No, I understand that it's an economic study we're doing, but it's all for the formation of a borough.
Yes.
And this would be a borough without Valdez, a Prince William Sound borough without Valdez in it.
Correct.
Doesn't necessarily have to be without Valdez, but this study.
Valdez hasn't agreed to contribute, but
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that Valdez asked to not be a part of this, so they were taken out of kind of respect for, you know, we don't want to be doing a borough feasibility study involving Valdez, you know, when they asked not to be involved at this point in time.
No, I understand, and I'm not arguing their right to be in or out of a borough, but if you have a Prince William Sound borough, they're kind of a major player in it with all the tanker traffic and the fishery stuff out of there. They're a big choke up.
further discussion, council?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Councilman?
Mr. Allison?
Yes, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I agree that that it doesn't hurt to have an economic study done. However, I think this was kind of brought on too swiftly, however you want to call it, surprised upon us as a community. Now they're asking us to pay the lion's share of the study, and we haven't really had that discussion amongst our local community. I don't have a problem providing data or being a part of it, them considering us in the study, but I don't want to pay a lion's share of it, and I think we need to have a discussion, at least amongst the key stakeholders within our own community, involve the school district and native villages, and native corporations, et cetera, amongst ourselves before we start spending a bunch of money on helping Girdwood get out of the purview of Anchorage, which is the main reason they're doing this study. I think we have to have the support of Valdez if we're going to do a Prince William Sound borough that ultimately has to be there. So anyway, I'm not in favor of this resolution particularly, but I would be willing to, I don't want to tell them that, they can't use Cordova's data or maybe consider us in the report, but I'm certainly not going to pay the lion's share of a study for them.
Councilman Schaefer.
So I think in order to have a discussion though with key stakeholders in town, like such as the school district or, business owners or what have you, we don't, at this point, the entire conversation is speculative because we have no idea what the pros and cons are for Cordova specifically. And so I think participating in and having a seat at the table in these discussions and in this study will give us that information so that we can be informed. We can bring that information back to the community and have a more informed discussion, is kind of how I see it. And yeah, from what I understood, we'd be, well, in this scenario, 20,000, but that's not paying the other portion of the study, the other half of the study. And Whittier is a much smaller community, and then Girdwood is more comparable, and so we're putting in a comparable amount.
Clerk, this is a roll call vote because it's also unbudgeted, and it would require a majority of council to pass.
It needs 4.
Okay, yeah.
It needs 4 yeses.
I move to refer to staff.
A second?
We have a motion and a second to refer to staff.
Yeah, the reason for referring there, Mayor, is I'm not gonna vote for it at this point in time with 20,000, so that's, you know, you've only got 3 votes, it won't pass, so.
Oh, you haven't got 3 votes.
Wait for another council member to get on that'll support it, or figure out negotiate a better deal with Girdwood and pay less, because I'm not willing to pay 20,000 for it.
Okay, or with the Boundary Commission or the state. I think they've contributed to these studies in the past, so.
Is there a discussion on, or can we have a discussion?
Yes, there's discussion on referring to staff, yeah.
My only hesitation about referring it and waiting for the next meeting is, I guess, getting going on it because they wanted to do the study pretty quickly, and maybe if they're not gonna have the funds to be able to do it, then maybe they're gonna move on to their next idea. And maybe that's not a bad thing for us. I guess the only thing that I am concerned about Girdwood doing maybe a different borough on the other side is Whittier joining them, and then the west side of the Prince William Sound is no longer part of our unorganized borough, and we have no say over what happens about it if it becomes a borough. I guess I do have a little fear of Prince William Sound borough breaking up. So say Valdez wants to break up to the Copper Center side, Whittier wants to go to the west side of Prince William Sound, and then because we're kind of on our own, they're going to put us in with, I mean, maybe Yakutat would be the only option for a borough. I mean, that might be the worst case scenario, but I think I would like to be engaged with it at the beginning of the process. That's my only concerns about tabling it, but if we need the votes to do that, then we need the votes to do that.
It's a motion to refer. Further discussion on the motion to defer? Refer. Thank you.
I understand the argument about a cohesive regional borough if we're gonna have one, but if we have Valdez, one of the biggest players in it, opting out, that kind of takes it off the table, and I'm not in favor of trying to figure out a way to fund school construction or school stuff for the city of Girdwood on Prince William Sound's back.
I have a question.
Councilman Schaefer?
So I think for clarification purposes, at this point Valdez is out, but I can't remember the name of this group. The Local Boundary Commission, they're the ones who have the ultimate power that draw the line. So even if Valdez at this point is out, they're gonna draw the line, or maybe, you know, potentially. So Valdez is out right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're actually out, I think.
I think it's a hard one because I think it actually comes down to whether the state approves the application or the recommendation from the Local Boundary Commission. So I think if we put an application, no matter what the application is, the Local Boundary Commission would put their thoughts in and change it to what they would think is a sustainable borough to move to the state. It's from my understanding. I don't really know. It's a tough one.
Valdez has the same risk of Cordova if a boundary is written around their community and a big chunk of pipeline and pump stations outside of their city limits are incorporated in the borough, then those funds go to the borough, not to Valdez. So just like Cordova not having control over some of the western fisheries. So.
And we're really connected with Valdez, but we are in a very different financial situation than Valdez too. I could somewhat understand why they don't want to be a part of this study.
Okay, so a motion to refer, does that require
Just a voice vote.
a voice vote and a majority of those present?
Yes,
Okay, so that would be 3 votes.
correct.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to refer? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. So refer to staff.
Yep.
Okay, unfinished business. We have one more ordinance and resolution from the supplemental agenda. Item 26A, it's resolution 08-18-20. And that's a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year lease of property legally described as a portion of U.S. Survey 2637, approximately 1,203 square feet of instructional space on the Cordova Junior Senior High School campus with the University of Alaska on behalf of the University of Alaska Prince William Sound College campus.
Move to approve resolution 08-18-20.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Meyer, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I think we discussed it last time in this.
Okay. Further discussion, council? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. Unfinished business is council action on extension performance of a deed of trust request from Dan Nichols, Lot 2, Block 3, CIP, Cordova Industrial Park. That's on page 70.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Ellison.
I move to extend Dan Nichols' performance deed of trust substantial completion date to December 1st, 2018.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to extend until December 1st, 2018. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Ellison?
Yeah, he's obviously moving forward on his project, obviously delays due to this, that, or the other. We've been here before extending his performance deed. The request was for September 1st. That isn't going to happen. We all know that. That's coming up here in a week or two. So give him this fall to get it done, and this is the last time I'll be voting to extend it, so we need to get it done.
Okay, further discussion, council?
So are we amending, is this an amendment to do it to December 1st? Or
No, he just
does it
didn't use the
matter?
suggested
Oh.
motion, he
Yes.
just created a different motion, that's fine.
Okay, further discussion, council? Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. New business. Council action on disposal and method of disposal of 93,335 square feet of Alaska Tideland Survey 220.
Uh-oh.
And there's maybe a bit of a conflict there. So maybe I will pass the gavel to Councilman Schaefer. And I'll take a seat in the audience. This is regarding disposal of property that the Cordova Electric is leasing. I'm sorry, this involves a piece of land that Cordova Electric is leasing from the city of Cordova, so conflict I maybe should have declared at the beginning.
Okay, are there any motions?
Yeah, Councilmember Allison here.
Yes, Councilmember Allison.
I move to dispose of a portion of ATS 220, 93,335 square feet as outlined in Cordova Municipal Code 5.22.060B by negotiating an agreement with Cordova Electric Cooperative, CEC, to lease or purchase the property.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Allison, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, this is the property that they've developed from the rocks a number of years ago. It's vital portion of our community, used for a vital service for all of us, and they've been leasing it, and now they want to buy it, so I don't have a problem with continuing to support CEC.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more discussion? Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Allison's sentiments. They've invested a lot in that piece of property, and it's important for the community. Makes sense to me. Okay, so any more discussion? Okay, so how do we?
All those in favor?
So all those in favor? Aye.
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 All those opposed?
So motion carries.
Motion carries.
Absolutely, gavel. Gavel that approved.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next item of business is approval of a $5,000 match to Native Village VX Denali Commission grants to fund a facilitator towards defining a plan for healthcare in Cordova.
Would you like me to speak to that?
Council, Executive Director of NBE Karen Kramer is requested to speak to that.
Should we move to put it on, open up the discussion?
I would think so.
Okay, so I move to approve participation with NBE in facilitating meetings with matching funding of $5,000. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Karen?
Are there any questions?
Does council have any questions of Director Kramer?
When would this organization of meetings start?
So I guess to give a little bit of background, we applied for a Denali Commission grant and received it. And so NBE is putting in a $5,000 match. We're asking the city to put in a $5,000 match. If that is approved by the city, then we would put out for RFP. And as the bids came back, or the responses to the request for proposals came back, we would bring them to the city, and I'm not sure how the city's process works, whether that would be Alan or who that would be, and that would be a joint, joint decision on who the facilitator would be, and then we would go from there. We're kind of thinking, and this is open to, open to discussion, but what we're kind of thinking is the facilitator would have individual meetings, so a meeting alone with NBE, a meeting alone with the city of Cordova, and then have joint meetings. And so if this is approved, we'd like to put out RFPs as soon as possible.
And what is the end product?
The end product would be a relationship that would be conducive to collaboration on healthcare in Cordova to enhance the quality for all the community members.
And just to be clear, when we say like the city being involved, that also includes CCMC would be involved in these talks and in these discussions as a healthcare provider in town.
I think Karen said to me that that would be up to us who we want to participate in those discussions.
Correct, yes.
Can I ask a question? We met with your commission, well, several months ago, 6 months ago now, trying to put together quarterly meetings. I think at that meeting, it was portrayed that NVE is kind of going in their direction, and they're going to continue to go in that direction. So how does this help us in that sentiment?
So NVE has been committed and remains committed to quality healthcare for Cordova, for tribal members and community members alike. And NVE is reaching out and asking the city of Cordova if it would like to be a part of that. But if the city feels like it cannot be, or for whatever reason doesn't wish to be part of that, NVE will continue on a path to provide quality healthcare for Cordovans.
And I think you may have said this, and I'm not sure if I heard, the Denali Commission, would they be selecting the facilitator, or how would the facilitator be selected from the RFPs?
So we would take on the putting out of RFPs, but when we got the bids back, we would come to the city and it would be a joint decision between NVE and the city.
Okay. Questions, Council?
Yeah, say, Councilmember Allison?
Yeah, Councilmember Allison.
Yeah, I don't have any questions per se. I just have a comment. I think it's good that we participate with the Native Village on this, regardless of which path either one of us choose to go down. Healthcare in the community is always going to be a community concern, and that's always going to involve the city, and it's always going to involve the village. Whether they go down this path and we go down that path, you know, our paths are on the same earth and in the same community, and we need to work together. And this is one way that we can participate in something together that provides a benefit to the community as a whole. So I support the resolution.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion, Council?
I would like to echo with what David Allison just said. We'd like to have a good working relationship with NVE. They're another government entity in Cordova, and we're a government entity, and so we should have a good working relationship. And healthcare is one in particular that our paths overcross in kind of a big way. So it'd be nice to work with them, at least to have a joint discussion and talk about healthcare for Cordova.
Further discussion, Council?
Just make one comment.
Could you just approach the microphone for...
Sure. I don't want to...
So Council, Kristen Carpenter is the Health Services Board Chairman, is requested to comment.
Thanks, yeah, and I guess I just want to, and I'm saying this to the community at large, I guess, and to NVE. When I read the comment in here, there's reference to roadblocks, to identify roadblocks, and I think, gosh, I don't think we've actively like thrown out sandbags in anybody's way. So I'm hoping that this could be characterized more as how can we collaborate? You know, because we have an investment, we have a facility. NVE is obviously interested in providing care to tribal members and to the community also. So I just would hope that if we do go forward with this, and if the whole intent is to collaborate, if the characterization could reflect that, and just saying, you know, we're all willing partners. I guess that's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion, Council? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item is council concurrence of mayor's appointment to fill a vacancy on the Parks and Rec Commission.
I move to concur with Mayor Copland's appointment of Ryan Schutze to the Parks and Rec Commission for a term through November 2021.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to concur. Discussion, Council?
The seat's been vacant for a couple months now, so it'll be good to have a complete commission, and thank you to Ryan for stepping up.
Further discussion, Council?
Yeah, thanks for stepping up and wanting to volunteer for this commission. We have a lot of boards and a lot of volunteers, so it's good to see some seats getting filled.
Any further discussion, Council? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Pending agenda, calendar, and elected and appointed officials list, page 81. Just a reminder again, the primary elections are next Tuesday, and you can vote in advance upstairs with Ruth Steele And then the voting will occur upstairs in the education room. I also just want to put on your little bit longer radar, there are going to be 3 council seat vacancies in the mayor's position up for the March election, so.
Oh, wow.
So the next agenda, we've moved the RFP and first reading of the purchase of the garbage truck up. We have other items. More in-depth budget discussion, I'm sure.
Yes.
And then some of the future items, we've kind of got in the parking lot. Okay, anything else, Susan?
A couple of things that happened at planning last night, or at least one. Site plan review.
Oh yeah, the capital improvements project list and site plan review for Baja Taco. Okay.
Oh yeah, and our capital priorities, 9.5, yeah.
Yeah, wow, coming up on the session already. Okay.
Oh my God. We're almost done.
Okay, audience participation. For those online, we did have good participation tonight on the council. I think we heard from most of them. So thank you, audience, for participating. Council comments. I'll start online. Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the chamber for their efforts, the 4th of July and Salmon Jam, and I was going to bring up the elections as well with the 3 council member spots and the lack of having a meeting for 2 months. As you consider whether you're going to run again or run at all, please consider your availability. It's you know, not that we have to have a meeting every 2 weeks, but we are elected to do the people's business, and you know, it puts a lot of pressure on the staff to have to, you know, they have to keep things going whether we meet or not. So we need to be making decisions for them and having some meetings. Otherwise, the community's going to figure out that they really don't need a council, and we don't want that to happen. That's too bad. Yeah, we need to support the staff in the questions that they have on their decision making. So thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Thanks for calling in, Councilmember Guard, and for being there, other council members, and we'll see you all next time around.
Thank you, Councilman Allison. Councilman Guard.
Yeah, kind of in response to what Councilmember Allison said, I think it's an important part of the community that the fishing fleet has for a voice. We usually don't run into the problems we've run into this year. It's kind of been a timing deal this year. Last year we didn't seem to have the problems. We carried our meetings off just fine. We will try to do better in the future. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody that's come and commented on everything. None of this works without community participation. So thank you very much, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councilman Schaefer.
Thank you, Kathy, for the presentation. That's all you do for the chamber and Cordova. Also, thank you to Ryan for stepping up to Parks and Rec.